a blessing. Now may the Holy Christ child, who came on Christmas Day, the gentle friend and brother who smiles upon your play, bless all the little children, however far away. A boy's visit to Santa Claus. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who talked a great deal about Santa Claus. He talked to his father, his mother, his brother and sisters, until it was Santa Claus at the breakfast table, Santa Claus at dinner, and Santa Claus at supper. This little boy had been told that far away in the Northland lived Santa Claus. He was sitting by the fire one day, watching the embers glow, and seeing castles in the glowing embers. "There is Santa Claus's house," he said, "the great building covered with snow. Why can't I go to see him?" The little boy had worked and had saved some money. He took the money and went down to the depot, bought a ticket, and before his father or mother knew about it, was gone to see Santa Claus. He travelled a long time on the train, and by reached the end of the railroad. He could go no farther on the train, for there was a great wide ocean. But people crossed the ocean, and so must the little boy, or at least a part of it, in order to reach Santa Claus's land. There was a great ship lying in port, soon to sail over the seas, and along with many people who went aboard the ship went the little boy. Soon every sail was spread, and out from the port went the ship, leaving far behind them the town. The ship sailed and sailed a long time, and finally land came in sight. They had reached an island lying somewhere far out in the mid-seas. Some of the people went ashore, and so did the little boy. But what a funny land it was to the little boy! All the people were little people. The grown men were not taller than the little boy, and they rode little ponies that were not larger than dogs. Then the little boy asked, "What land is this? Does Santa Claus live here?" And they said, "No. This is the land that lies east of the sun and west of the moon. You have not come too soon. Northward you must go, to the land of ice and snow." And so, one day, the little boy found a ship that was going to sail to the Northland, and in this ship he went. The ship sailed and sailed a long time, until it finally came to where the sea was all frozen over, to the land of icebergs and snowfields. The ship could go no farther, so what do you suppose the little boy did then? He was in the land of the reindeer, and over the snowfields he went in search of Santa Claus. One day, as he was travelling over the snowfields to find Santa Claus's house, he saw not far away what at first seemed to be a hill, but soon he saw that it was not a hill, but a house covered with ice and snow. "That must be Santa Claus's house," he said. Soon the little boy was standing in front of the great building, whose towers seemed to reach the sky. Up the shining steps he went, and soon he was standing in front of the door. The little boy saw no doorbell, and so he knocked on the door. No one answered, and then louder he knocked again. Still no one answered. He began to feel afraid. Perhaps this was the house of a giant. If Santa Claus lived there, he might be angry with him for coming, but once more he knocked. And then he heard a noise far down at the other end of the hall. Someone was coming. Then suddenly the latch went click, and the door stood wide open. And who do you suppose was there? Santa Claus? No, a little boy with blue eyes and a bright, sweet face. Then the little boy said, "Good morning. Does Santa Claus live here?" And the other little boy said, "Yes. Come in, come in. I am Santa Claus's little boy." He took him by the hand and said, "I am very glad to see you." Then the two little boys walked down the long hallway, doors on this side and doors on that, until they came to the last door on the left-hand side. On this door, Santa Claus's little boy knocked, and a great voice said, "Come in." He opened the door and walked in, and who do you suppose was there? Santa Claus? Yes, there was Santa Claus himself, a great big fat man sitting by the fire with long white beard, blue eyes, and the merriest, cheeriest face you ever saw. Then Santa Claus's little boy said, "Father, here is a little boy who has come to see you." Santa Claus looked down over his spectacles and said, "Well, how are you? I am mighty glad to see you." "Yes, yes, I know him. I have been to his house on many a night and filled up his stocking. How are Elizabeth and Louise and Catherine?" Over on the other side of the fireplace sat Mrs. Santa Claus. She was a grandmother-looking woman with white hair and gold-rimmed spectacles. She was sitting by the fire knitting. She put her arms around the little boy and kissed him. Then the two little boys sat down in front of the fire and talked together. By and by, Santa Claus's little boy said to the other little boy, "Don't you want to go over the building and see what we have in the different rooms? This building has 1,000 rooms." And the little boy said, "Who? Oh, oh." And Santa Claus's little boy said, "Yes, and something different in every room." Then they went into a large room, and what do you suppose was in there? Nothing but doll babies, some with long dresses and some with short, some with black eyes and some with blue. Then into another room they went, and it was full of toys, wagons, and horses. Another room was full of storybooks. Another room was a candy kitchen where Santa Claus made candy. Another room was a workshop where Santa Claus made toys for the children. Then they went into a long, large room, the largest of them all, and in this room were a great many tables. On these tables were suits, cloaks, and hats, and shoes and stockings for the children. The little boy wanted to know what they did with so many clothes, and Santa Claus's little boy said, "We take these to the little children who have no father or mother to make them clothes." And so they went through all the rooms of the great building, except one, which was away upstairs in the corner. What was in this room no one would tell the little boy, nor would they take him into the room, and the little boy wondered what was in the room. The little boy stayed at Santa Claus's house several days, and he had a splendid time. Some days the two little boys would slide down the hill on a sled. Some days they would hitch up the reindeer and go sleighing. Some days they would go into the candy kitchen and help Santa Claus make candy, or into the workshop and help him make toys. But one day something happened. Santa Claus came to the little boy and said, "I am going away today for a little while. My wife and my little boy are going with me. Now," he said, "you can go with us, or you can stay here and keep house for us while we are gone." The little boy thought to himself that Santa Claus had been so good to him that he would stay and keep house while Santa Claus was away. So he said he would stay. And then Santa Claus gave him a great bunch of keys and said, "Now you can go into all the rooms and play, but you must not go into that room upstairs in the corner." The little boy said, "All right." And with that Santa Claus, his wife, and his little boy went down the steps, got into the sleigh, wrapped themselves up in furs, popped the whip, and away they went. The little boy stood and watched them until they disappeared behind the snow hills. Then he turned and went back into the house. He felt like a little man in that great house all by himself. From room to room he went. He went into the game room and rolled the balls. Some of the balls were so large that they were as high as the little boy's head. They were of rubber, and if you would drop one from the top of the house, it would bounce clear back to the top. The little boy went into the candy kitchen and ate some of the candy. He went into the workshop and worked on some toys, then into the library and read some of the books, then into the parlor and banged on the piano. But after a while, the little boy was tired, and he said, "I wish Santa Claus would hurry and come back." He was lonely, and so he thought he would go up on the housetop and look out to see if he could see Santa Claus coming home. Up the steps he went. When he reached the top, there was another flight. Up these he went, and still another flight. Up, up he went, until it seemed he had gone 1,000 steps. But finally he came out on top. The little boy stood there with his hand on the railing and looked out, but all he could see were the snowfields, white and glistening. Santa Claus was not in sight. He could see the track over the snow that the sleigh had made, but that was all. Then down the steps he came, and it just happened that he came by the room that Santa Claus told him he must not go into. As he passed, he stopped in front of the door and said to himself, "I wonder what they have in that room, and why they did not want me to go in." He took hold of the knob and gave it a turn, but the door was locked. Then he shut one eye and peeped through the keyhole, but he could see nothing. It was all dark. Then he put his mouth at the keyhole and blew through it, but he could hear nothing. Then he put his nose there and smelled, but he could smell nothing. "I wonder what they have in the room," he said. "I believe I will see just for fun which one of these keys will fit in the lock." The little boy had in his hand the great bunch of keys. He tried one key, and that would not fit. Then he tried another, and another, and another, and kept on until he came to the last key. "Now," he said to himself, "if this key does not fit, I am going." He tried it, and it was the only key on the bunch that would fit. "Now," he said, "I shall not go into the room, but I will just turn the key and see if it will unlock the lock. It may fit in the lock, and then not unlock the lock." He turned the key slowly, and the latch went click, click, and the door flew wide open. What do you suppose was in the room? It was all dark. The little boy could see nothing. He had his hand on the knob, and it seemed to him that his hand was caught between the knob and key, and somehow, as the door opened, it pulled him in. When he stepped into the room, he felt a breeze blowing, and, more than that, as he stepped down, he found the room did not have any bottom, just a dark hole. Well, as the little boy stepped over into the room, he felt himself falling, away, down, down, down yonder. He shut his eyes, expecting every moment to strike something and be killed. But before he did, someone caught him by the shoulders and shook him and said, "Wake up, wake up." He opened his eyes, and where do you suppose the little boy was? At home. It was Christmas morning, and his father was calling him to get up. The sun was shining across his little bed. He looked toward the fireplace, and there all the stockings were hanging full. The little boy had been to see Santa Claus, but he went by that wonderful way we call dreamland, a Christmas legend. Beyond Bethlehem, which is a big village, walled and moated, lies a hilly country, exceeding wild and covered with dense woods of firs, pines, larches, beeches, and similar trees. At times the people of Bethlehem, going in bands, cut down these trees and burn them to charcoal, which they pack on mules and sell in the valley. Sometimes they tie together whole tree trunks, such as would serve for beams, rafters, and masts, and float them down the rivers, which are many and very rapid. On these mountains, in the thickest part of the forests, a certain woodcutter bethought him to build a house, wherein to live with his family, store the timber, and care for his beasts. For this purpose he employed certain pillars and pieces of masonry that stood in the forest, being remains of a temple of the heathen, which had long ceased to exist. He cleared the wood round about, leaving only tree stumps and bushes. Close by, in a ravine between high fir trees, ran a river of greenish waters, exceedingly cold and rapid. It was always full to the brim, even in midsummer. owing to the melting snows, and around up hill and down dale stretched the woods of firs, larches, pines, and other noble and useful trees, emitting a very pleasant and virtuous fragrance. The man thought to enjoy his house, and came with his family and servants. Also he brought his horses and mules and oxen, which he had employed to carry down the timber and charcoal. But scarcely were they settled when an earthquake rent the place, tearing wall from wall and pillar from pillar, and a voice was heard in the air crying, Ex domus Domini Dei, 16s. Whereupon they fled, astonished and in terror, and returned to the town. And no one of that man's family ventured henceforth to return to that house or to that wood, save one called Hilarion, a poor lad and a servant, but of upright heart and faith. He offered to go back and take up his abode there, and cut down the trees and burn the charcoal for his master. So he went. He was but a poor lad, clothed in leathern tunic and coarse serge hood. And Hilarion took with him an ox and an ass to load with charcoal and drive down to Bethlehem to his master. The first night on which Hilarion slept in that house, which had fallen to ruin, he heard voices as of children, both boys and maidens, singing in the air. But he closed his eyes, repeated a paternoster, turned over, and slept. Another night he heard voices which made him tremble, but being clean of heart he said 2 aves, and went to sleep. And once more did he hear the voices, and they were passing sweet. And with them came a fragrance as of crushed herbs and many kinds of flowers, frankincense and orris root. Hilarion feared the voices were those of heathen gods, but he said his prayers and slept. But at length one night, as Hilarion heard these songs, he opened his eyes, and behold, the place was light, and a great staircase of light, like golden cobwebs, stretched up to heaven, and hosts of angels appeared, coming and going, with locks like honeycomb, and robes of rose and green, azure and white, thickly embroidered with purest pearls. They had wings as of butterflies, and peacocks' tails, and a golden glory shone about their heads. They went to and fro, carrying garlands and strewing flowers, so that, although midwinter, it was like a garden in June, sweet with roses and lilies and gillyflowers. And the angels sang, and when they had finished their work, they said, It is well. And they departed, holding hands as they flew into the sky above the fir trees. And Hilarion was astonished, and prayed fervently. And the next day, when he was cutting a fir tree in the wood, he met among the rocks a man old and venerable, with a long grey beard and a solemn air. He was clad in crimson, and under his arm he carried written books and a scourge. And Hilarion said, Who art thou? The forest is haunted by spirits, and I would know whether thou be of them or of men. And the old man made answer, I am a wise man and a king. I have spent all my days learning the secrets of things. I know how the trees grow, how the waters run, and where treasures be. I can teach thee what the stars sing, and in what manner the ruby and emerald gather their light in the heart of the earth. I can chain the wind and stop the sun, for I am wise above all men. But I seek one wiser than myself, and I go through the woods in search of him, my master. And Hilarion said, Tarry thou here, and thou shalt see, if I mistake not, him whom thou seekest. So the old man tarried in the forest, and built himself a hut of stones. And the day after that, as Hilarion went forth to catch fish in the river, he met on the bank a lady, beautiful beyond compare. And Hilarion asked, Who art thou? The forest is haunted by spirits. Art thou one of them? And she answered, I am a princess, the fairest of women. Kings and princes have brought gifts to me. They have hung wreaths on my palace and strewn flowers in my garden. I am beautiful beyond compare, but I seek one more beautiful than myself. Day by day I go searching my master by the lakes and rivers. And Hilarion made answer thus, Tarry thou here, and thou shalt see, if I mistake not, him whom thou seekest. And the lady tarried by the river and built herself a cabin of reeds and leaves. That night was the coldest and longest winter night. Hilarion made for himself a bed of fern and hay in the stable of the ox and the ass, and he lay close to them for warmth. And lo! In the middle of the night the ass brayed and the ox bellowed, and Hilarion started up. He saw the heavens open with a great brightness as of beaten and fretted gold. Angels wreathed in roses were coming and going, and as they held each other's hands they sang, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And Hilarion wondered again, and prayed fervently. And that day toward noon there came through the wood one bearing a staff and leading a mule on which was seated a woman. They were poor folk, travel-stained. And the man said to Hilarion, My name is Joseph. I am a carpenter of the city of Nazareth. My wife is called Mary. Suffer thou us to rest, and my wife to lie on this straw of the stables. And Hilarion said, You are welcome. Hilarion laid down more fern and hay, and gave provender to the mule. And Mary brought forth her firstborn son, and Hilarion took it and laid it in the manger. And he went forth into the woods, where he found the wise man and the beautiful woman. Come with me to my stable, he said, where the fir trees were cleared above the river. And they went with him to the ruined house, and they saw the babe lying in the manger. Then the wise man and the beautiful woman knelt down before the child. He is exceeding fair, said the princess. He is wiser than I am, said the king. Surely this is he that is our master. And the skies opened, and there came forth angels, such as Hilarion had seen before, with the glory of radiant gold about their heads and garlands of roses around their necks. And they sang again, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. A legend of Saint Boniface. On a wild winter night about 1200 years ago, the great English missionary St. Boniface and a score of faithful followers were travelling through the gloomy forest in a lonely region of Hesse, Germany. They made their way painfully and slowly, for they were obliged to cut a path through the tangled thicket and great twisted branches. The little band had come into the wilderness to share the message of the Prince of Peace with hordes of barbarous savages who believed in witches and werewolves, worshipped false idols, and made sacrifices to pagan gods. In their passionate joy to bring the glad tidings of the gospel, these apostles willingly endured blinding snowstorms and cruel hunger, courageously risked death from wild beasts and murderous savages. Since noon, these faithful Christians had fought their way through the forest. The morning they had spent at Geismar, where St. Boniface took into Christ's fold almost 300 pagans. In simplest words, the great apostle urged the rude barbarians to give up their false idols and bloody sacrifices. He told them the thrilling story of Christ's birth, death, and resurrection, and the wonderful promise of the kingdom of peace. The savages stood listening in breathless silence. Slowly, they caught a glimpse of the light of truth, came timidly forward, and knelt at the ruled altar where St. Boniface stood. "Dost thou think the people of the wilderness will hold to the new faith, Father?" asked one of the followers. "I hope so, lad," answered St. Boniface. "We must try to keep watch over them. Again and again they must hear the wonderful story. It is hard indeed for these pagans to turn from their false idols and worship an all-loving, merciful Father. We must watch and pray." "When shall we come again to Geismar, Father?" asked the youth. "It will be a year before our band can return to this region. In the meantime, I hope to send other missionaries here," answered the great apostle. "Dost thou think we are near the monastery, father?" asked the footsore youth. "I believe we are. If we do not reach it in another hour, we must light a fire and lie down under the trees. Courage, lad. This has been a fruitful journey. May the converts hold fast to the glory of Christ." A year passed quickly. St. Boniface and his helpers were again working among the wild children of the forest. Often the great apostle's heart sank when he heard that some of the converts were worshipping their false idols again. A few remained stanch and true to the new faith. Others hopelessly confused the old superstitious ideas with the gospel of love and service. "Thou art not discouraged, father?" whispered the youth, who noticed that St. Boniface was lost in thought. "Discouraged? Never," answered the apostle with flashing eyes. "I am deciding how to strike the next blow at their cruel superstitions." In a few moments, St. Boniface said, "Let us stop here for a little while. My plan is made. Tonight is the pagan Yule-tide. Several tribes will gather around the thunder oak of Geismar to offer sacrifices. The priests declare that nothing but human blood will appease the wrath of Thor. Many wavering converts will be there. Come, we will destroy once for all the sacred monarch of the forest. We will show the poor benighted people that the worship of Thor is nothing but a shadow. Our axes are sharp, our arms are strong. God is with us. Come." With new inspiration, the Christian band pushed on. An hour's hard struggle brought them to the Thunder Oak, which stood on a broad, low hill near Geismar. There they saw several hundred pagans standing in a semicircle around the gigantic oak. Near the sacred tree burned a dull red fire, and in the light of the flickering blaze the Christians saw an old priest and a little fair-haired boy. "It is as I feared," whispered St. Boniface. "They are ready to make human sacrifice. Forward!" In a moment all eyes were fixed on the little band of Christians that advanced toward the priest. Some of the pagans recognized the apostle before whom they had knelt 1 year ago. "Friends," said St. Boniface, holding up the cross, "again we come to bring the message of peace from the All-Father. Thor is dead. With our axes we will prove to you that the God of thunder is powerless before the God of love." St. Boniface and a helper, with their wood axes in their hands, stepped up to the great tree. With powerful blows they cut deep gashes into its sides. Suddenly a mighty whirling wind passed over the forest. Thor's oak shuddered, swayed and fell. It crashed to the ground and split into 4 huge pieces. "The God of love is mightier than the God of thunder," declared St. Boniface with bowed head. "Christ hath conquered Thor." In deepest silence the tribe stood gazing at the ruined oak. By the side of one of the huge pieces stood a beautiful little fir tree, unharmed by the storm. St. Boniface raised his voice and cried, "My friends of the forest, show your faith in the true God by building a chapel out of this fallen timber." In a few moments he added, "And behold this little fir tree, with its green leaves and beautiful spire pointing to the stars. It is an emblem of joy and peace, and life everlasting. Go no more into the dark forest to make sacrifices of blood. Take this little tree into your homes, and on Christ's blessed birthday gather around it with joyous songs and loving gifts. Call it the tree of the Christ child." They took up the little fir tree and carried it to the village. Once more, as they circled about the tree of the Christ child, St. Boniface, in simple words, told them the wonderful story of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. A little Roman shepherd. His name was Bruno, and he lived a long, long way from here on the Roman Campagna. His house was a pointed hut thatched with straw, and back of it was the fold where the sheep lived. And then, for miles and miles, there was no other living thing for a little boy to see. There was no one to play with. There was nothing for a little boy to do but tend the sheep and milk the goats and wish, oh, so hard, that he might go on that long Appian way to the gate of St. Sebastian and to Rome on the other side. Piccola had told him about Rome. Piccola's father bought wool and sold it to the traders at Rome. Twice a year, Piccola and her father came out to the Campagna at shearing time. The father haggled over the lira. He must pay Bruno's father. Piccola and Bruno sat under an olive tree, their hands tightly clasped, as Piccola told Bruno of Rome. "You should see it at the festa of Christmas," she exclaimed. "Every shop is full of lights in the evening, and the flower carts stand at all the corners. There is a manger and babe in the chapel, and—" Piccola's voice was rich with wonder. "There is a box that talks in a shop on the Corso." "I don't believe you. How could it talk? What makes it talk?" Bruno asked, but this Piccola could not tell. "It talks, that is all I know," she said, "and it sings." And she might have told more, but her father came and she must say goodbye to Bruno. In a moment he could see nothing of Piccola but the flash of her little scarlet and green skirt and the blue cornflower she wore in her black braids. Then there was only a cloud of dust to hide the yellow cart wheels, and Piccola was gone. To Rome, where there was a box that would talk and sing. There came long, sweet, all alike days for Bruno and the sheep. The wheat grew yellow and heavy to breaking with sweetness, and Bruno watched the harvesters. The olives ripened, and the grapes, and the figs. Then the sun set earlier, and the nights were chilly with frost, and Bruno and his father put warm cloaks made of skin over their blue smocks. "It is near the festa of Christmas," said Bruno one day. "I have never been to Rome. Will you take me there to hear the talking box on the Corso, father? It both speaks and sings." "No." Bruno's father was quick in his reply, being a hard man after many lonely years. "The ewe lambs are ailing, and I cannot leave them, and there are no singing boxes in Rome." So Bruno followed the old sheep and the lambs to their grassy hill and helped to drive them home at night until it was the eve of the Christmas festa. On this eve, he locked the gate of the fold and turned to go into the hut. His father would be dozing, perhaps, for the cold dusk had crept over the great Campagna, and one star shone out in the purple sky. It hung, pointing, over Rome. As Bruno looked up at it, he heard a sound of faraway bells. They might be the bells of Rome. Oh, beautiful Rome, with its gay, bright streets, and its flower carts, and its magic box that could sing and turn loneliness into music. Bruno pulled the hood of his cloak over his head. His bare feet flashed over the fields of dry grass and wheat stubble. He found the old Appian road and raced along it in the path of starlight. He was running away. He was going to Rome. For an hour he ran. He had gone so far and so fast, and his ears rang so with the singing Christmas bells that, at first, he did not hear it. The bleating of a foolish little ewe-lamb. Then it came again, and Bruno stopped. The lamb lay under a bunch of dried brown stalks, its flesh torn by thistles and its eyes dull with fear because it had lost its mother. "Stupid! Why did you run away? I can't take you home." Bruno stamped one little brown foot. "I'm going to Rome for Christmas, do you hear? I won't take you home." But as he spoke, he stooped down and lifted the trembling, tearful little creature in his arms and turned back toward the fold. The star path stretched at Bruno's back now. Ahead were black shadows, and a biting wind whirled small stones that cut his face and made mocking sounds as it scurried through the ruined arches of the aqueduct. He lost the road, and stiff cactus thorns cut his slim ankles. The lamb was heavier with each step. He wouldn't cry, no Roman lad cries, his father had told him, but he couldn't find his way. The little shepherd boy dropped to the ground. He could hear the Christmas bells. No, it was a clear, sweet voice coming from a polished wood box that sang him to sleep. When he opened his heavy eyelids, Piccola's dancing eyes met his. What a gay little Christmas sprite she looked in her warm crimson hood and cloak. Bruno himself lay in his father's arms, and Piccola's father was lifting the strayed lamb into the two-wheeled yellow cart, a lantern in one hand. "We had to go to Albano with wool, and on the way back I begged father to stop for you, Bruno, to go back to Rome for Christmas. We couldn't find you. Your father came with us to look for you, and the lamb told us where you were." My brave little Roman lad. It was Bruno's father who stroked his head with long, thin fingers. "We will return with the lamb to the fold and find warm milk for you. Then you may go to Rome for the fiesta with the little signorina. And we're going to buy a box that talks," added Piccola happily. "And sings," smiled back Bruno as he looked toward the Christmas star and the gate of St. Sebastian. A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care. In hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there, the children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced through their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. "Now, Dasher! Now, Dancer! Now, Prancer and Vixen! On, Comet! On, Cupid! On, Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall! Now, dash away, dash away, dash away all! As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry! His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly, that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Christmas in many lands. Santa Claus tomorrow comes, bringing gifts in plenty, drums and trumpets, guns, a score, flags and sabres and still more, yes. A whole great army corps, would it might be plenty. Bring us, dear old Santa Claus, do not pass us blindly. Musketeer and grenadier, grizzly bear with panther near, horse and donkey, sheep and steer. Bring us all these kindly. Hans, I wish St. Nicholas would hurry up and come. I think he is dreadfully slow. Jechen, he won't come while we're here, I'm afraid. Besides, he has so far to travel. Only think how many places he has to go. Hans, does he visit all the little children all over the world? She. Why? Of course. Slowly. At least, I suppose so. Hans, do all the children have Christmas trees? Jechen. Oh, I hope so. Wouldn't it be too bad not to have a tree on Christmas? Haynes, I think it would be fun to have an airship and go about the world tonight and see what all the little children are doing. G. Where would you like to go? Hans, I'd like to fly over the sea and visit Cousin Heinrich in America. Jiha, I'd be afraid to fly so far. I'd go to Holland. It's such a little way. Hans, oh! I'd fly up in the mountains of Switzerland. Stretching. Thoughtfully. I think I'd rather have the children come and tell us about their Christmas. I'd be afraid in an airship. Age. Eagerly. Let's shut our eyes and wish they would come. They'll be sure to if we wish hard on Christmas Eve. We'll have a Christmas party. Both children shut their eyes and are silent. A fairy enters. She is dressed in white, spangled with gilt. She has a star on her forehead and carries a wand. She dances about the stage, singing, then stands in front of the children. She waves her wand over them, and they open their eyes. Jechen. Rising in surprise, who are you, fairy? Fairy, I am the Christmas fairy, and I have come to answer your wish. I grant all the wishes that good children make on Christmas Eve. H. earnestly, oh dear fairy, will children really come from America and from Switzerland and from Holland to tell us about their Christmas? Fairy, they will come because you wished it, and from other countries as well. She dances around the room once more and vanishes. Hans and Gretchen run to the door and look after her. They clap their hands and dance around the room for joy. Hans, we're really going to have a Christmas party. Let's go on trimming the tree. While they are doing this, they finish the song. But indeed, you know our need, know our heart's desires. Children, father and mamma, you know too our grandpapa. Yes, we all are waiting. Ah! Waiting, you know, tires. The sound of a bell is heard, and a little girl enters, ringing a Swiss bell. She is dressed in a Swiss costume. Swiss. Chilled. I come from the lofty mountains of Switzerland to give you greeting. The two children run to welcome her. Hans, did you come in an airship? Swiss. Child, no, the Christmas fairy brought me. What a beautiful tree. Hans, yes, it's our Christmas tree. Don't you have one? Doesn't St. Nicholas bring you presents? Swiss. Child, no, the Christmas Lady Tenfawn comes to us. She wears a white gown and a red cap, and she carries a basket of toys on her back. But only good children get toys. She brings a switch for the bad ones, and they must keep it all the year and get whipped whenever they are naughty. Gretchen. I'm so glad St. Nicholas has a wife to help him. It would be so hard for him to get along by himself. Let's sing a little till the other children come. They dance slowly around the tree, singing. While they are singing, a hard clacking of wooden shoes is heard at the door. The children stop to listen, and a little Dutch girl enters. She carries a wand with a star on the end and has a basket of sweetmeats on her arm. "Gretchen!" to greet her. "Ah! Here is our little neighbour. I'm so glad you have come." Do the children in Holland have a Christmas Eve like ours? Dutch. Chilled. We don't have a pretty tree like that. And we don't hang our stockings before the fire. Good St. Nicholas comes to visit us in the evening. He brings toys for the good children and a big birch rod for the naughty ones. When he comes in, everyone joins in this song of welcome, welcome good. St. Nicholas, welcome. Bring no rod for us tonight. While our voices bid thee welcome, every heart with joy is light. Then we recite verses and play games for a while. As St. Nicholas goes away, he scatters sweetmeats on the floor. We children scramble for them and try to fill our baskets. Then, after he has gone away, we all go into another room and put our shoes on a table. We always put a bit of hay in each shoe for St. Nicholas's good old horse, Sleipner. Gretchen, oh! St. Nicholas comes to us with reindeer. D-U-T-T, sh. Chilled. In Holland he goes about on his good horse, Sleipner. Then we all say, good night, and go to bed. While we are asleep, St. Nicholas comes back and fills all the shoes. Everyone in the house gets presents. Gretchen, why do you carry that pretty star? Dutch. Chilled. This is the Star of Bethlehem. The children in Holland walk about the streets early on Christmas Eve and follow one who carries the star. People give the children gifts of money and other things, and these are all given to the poor. Gretchen, I think that is a beautiful Christmas Eve. Will you try to teach us your song of welcome to St. Nicholas? The Dutch child sings her song again, and the other children sing it after her. They join hands and dance, a simple folk dance in time to the music. As they sing, a sound of sleigh bells interrupts them. A child runs in, dressed in Russian coat and furs. She is glistening with snow. How? Yassien. Child, oh, your fire looks warm and bright. Christmas is cold indeed on the snowy plains of Russia. I am sorry for poor Babushka tonight. Gretchen, come up to the fire and get warm, and tell us who Babushka is. All seat themselves around the fire. Oh, Shield, Babushka, don't you know about her? On Christmas Eve, every little Russian child expects a visit from a little old woman called Babushka. Long, long ago, on Christmas Eve, Babushka was sweeping her house when 3 wise men came to the door and asked her to go with them to bear gifts to a little child. She said she would go when she had finished sweeping, but they said, "We may not wait. We follow a star." So they went their way. Afterwards, Babushka was sorry she hadn't gone with them. So she started out alone to find the child, and ever since, on Christmas Eve, she wanders about to every house where there are children, seeking the wonderful child the wise men talked about. But always, when she asks for the child, the answer is the same. Farther on, Gretchen, poor Babushka. I hope she will find the child sometime. Let's go on with the song. Perhaps someone else will come. They continue singing. A French child enters. ... Hey! H-A-N-S. Oh! Here comes a little maid of France. I know her by her pretty cap. Come, tell us what you do on Christmas Eve, and who brings your gifts. French child, Christmas is a holy time with us. The Christ child himself brings the gifts. We call him Le Petit Noël, Hans. Do you hang up your stocking for him to fill? French. Chilled. No. We put our shoes by the hearth at night, and Le Petit Noël comes down the chimney and fills them. Hans, your shoes! I'm glad we hang up our stockings. They hold so much more. Wooden shoes won't stretch. Jetchen, what a lovely Christmas party we are having. Just think, here are children from Switzerland, Holland, Russia, and France. I wonder if any more children will come. Let's all dance and sing while we wait. They go on with the song. Sound of sleigh bells is heard outside. An English child enters. English. Child! A Merry Christmas from Merry England. Hans, oh! Another guest. How lovely of you to come to our party. Do you have Christmas Eve parties at home? English. Child. Oh yes, Christmas Eve is the merriest night of the year with us. Hans, tell us all about it. The children seat themselves about the hearth, the English child in the centre. English. Chilled. Early in the morning we go to the woods and gather evergreens. Then we trim all the rooms with holly, mistletoe, box, and bay. In the evening we light the great Yule log. Jetchen, what's the Yule log? English. Child, well, it's a big log that we always burn in the fireplace on Christmas Eve. All the family meet together on Christmas Eve, and we have a beautiful tree like yours. Everyone gives a present to everyone else, and we sing and tell stories and have a happy time. Then early on Christmas morning, the waits come round and waken us, singing Christmas carols. At dinner, we have a great big plum pudding, and Mother puts brandy on it and sets fire to the brandy, and it makes a pretty blue flame. G-R-E Chechen. I think that must be a happy Christmas. Who are the waits that sing the carols? English. Child, they are children who go about from house to house, early on Christmas morning, and sing. Getchen, will you sing one of your carols for us? English. Child, yes, if you will all help. English child sings carol. I saw 3 ships come sailing in. On Christmas Day, I saw 3 ships come sailing in. On Christmas Day in the morning. Pray whither sailed those ships all 3? On Christmas Day, pray whither sailed those ships all 3? On Christmas Day in the morning? And all the bells on earth shall ring. On Christmas Day, and all the bells on earth shall ring. On Christmas Day in the morning. Children join in the refrain. As they finish the carol, a Swedish child enters. Swedish child, what a beautiful Christmas party. I'm so glad the Christmas fairy brought me. Hans, oh, are you another little maid from France? Swedish, child, oh no, I come from the frozen north, from Sweden. Jetchen, do you have Christmas way up there? And does St. Saint Nicholas go so far on Christmas Eve? Swedish child, of course we have Christmas, but I never heard of St. Nicholas before. He, Ans, Studer Gretchen. There's another country he doesn't go to. Gretchen. To Swedish child, doesn't anyone bring the little Swedish children presents on Christmas Eve? Swedish child. Oh yes, the Christmas gnomes do that. They are a little old man and a little old woman who come to every home in Sweden, bringing gifts for all in the house. The old man carries a bell, and the old woman a large basket filled with gifts. In Sweden, everyone is remembered on Christmas Day, and a sheaf of grain is fastened to a pole at each house so that not even the birds are forgotten. Hans, oh, Gretchen, let us put up some grain for the birds to, morrow morning. Song is heard outside. Gee, Gretchen, hark, someone is singing. They all listen. Irish child sings behind the screen. At Christmas time in Ireland there is feasting, there is song, and merrily the fife and fiddle play, and lightly dance the colleens and the boys the evening long. At Christmas time in Ireland far away, Irish child enters singing, "Oh, there's nothing half so sweet in any land on earth as Christmas time in Ireland far away." Hands, Christmas time in Ireland. Irish child, yes, Christmas Day is a day of feasting and merriment. Where did you get that pretty tree? Hands, it's our Christmas tree. Don't you have one? Irish chilled, no, I never saw one before. Hands, doesn't St. Nicholas come to you? Don't you get presents? Irish child chilled, shaking her head thoughtfully, no. Hands, then how can you have a Merry Christmas? Irish child, no, we don't get gifts at home. We give them to the poor. On Christmas Eve we light the great Yule log in the fireplace. Then, while it roars and crackles on the hearth, we sit around and hear the tale that we love so well, of the shepherds who watch their flock by night, and of the Christ-child in the manger. Before we go to bed, we put the great candle decked with ribbons in the window so that our welcome may shine out for the Christ-child, should he wander that way. On Christmas morning, of course, we all go to church, and then we come home to the best dinner, and all the young people dance and make merry far into the night. Hands to Gretchen. Think of a Christmas Eve without a tree or St. Nicholas or gifts. Irish child, but we have the Yule log and the storytelling, and we dance and sing. Hands, was that one of your Christmas songs you were singing as you came in? Irish child, yes, everyone sings that song at Christmas time. Hands, won't you sing the rest of it for us? Child finishes the song. At Christmas time in Ireland, how the holly branches twine in stately hall and cabin old and grey, and red among the leaves the holly berries twine. At Christmas time in Ireland far away. Just as she finishes the song, the American child runs in. They all rise to greet her. American child, I'm late because I had so far to come. The ferry carried me high over the seas from America. Hans, America. I'm so glad you have come. I wondered what the American children were doing tonight. American child, looking around. Why, I think you must do just what we do on Christmas Eve. You have a tree. You put evergreens around, and you hang your stockings up for Santa Claus to fill. Haynes, Santa Claus? St. Nicholas comes to us. Gretcre. He's the same, Hans, only they call him a little different. Dutch child, does he come on his horse? American child, no, he is drawn in a sleigh with 8 reindeer. He comes down the chimney and fills our stockings with toys and candy when we are asleep. Dutch chilled, doesn't he bring a switch for the bad ones? American chilled, oh no. Santa Claus never leaves anything but toys. Dutch chilled, I wish he wouldn't bring it when he comes to us. Gretchen, isn't it funny? We all do different things on Christmas Eve, but we all have a happy time and love it, and I'm sure each one of us likes her own way the best. Sounds of sleigh bells are heard outside, and children laughing. Gretchen runs to the window and looks out. Oh, here are the village children. They have come to our Christmas party. The village children run in, all greet each other and join in singing. This tree was grown on Christmas Day. Hail, old Father Christmas, old and young together say, Hail, old Father Christmas. Bright the coloured tapers shine. Hail, old Father Christmas. Bright today the love divine. Hail, old Father Christmas. Bright and light our Christmas tree. Hail, old Father Christmas. Bright and light our hearts must be. Hail, old Father Christmas! Dance then, children, dance and sing. Hail, old Father Christmas! All the merry chorus ring. Hail, old Father Christmas! Christmas at the Hollow Tree Inn. Once upon a time, when the robin and turtle and squirrel and jackrabbit had all gone home for the winter, nobody was left in the hollow tree except the coon and the possum and the old black crow. Of course the others used to come back and visit them pretty often, and Mr. Dog too, now that he had got to be good friends with all the deep woods people, and they thought a great deal of him when they got to know him better. Mr. Dog told them a lot of things they had never heard of before, things that he'd learned at Mr. Man's house, and maybe that's one reason why they got to liking him so well. He told them about Santa Claus, for one thing, and how the old fellow came down the chimney on Christmas Eve to bring presents to Mr. Man and his children, who always hung up their stockings for them. And Mr. Dog said that once he had hung up his stocking too, and got a nice bone in it. That was so good, he had buried and dug it up again as much as 6 times before spring. He said that Santa Claus always came to Mr. Man's house, and that whenever the children hung up their stockings, they were always sure to get something in them. Well, the Hollow Tree people had never heard of Santa Claus. They knew about Christmas, of course, because everybody, even the cows and sheep, knows about that, but they had never heard of Santa Claus. You see, Santa Claus only comes to Mr. Moz, Man's house, but they didn't know that either, so they thought if they just hung up their stockings he'd come there too, and that's what they made up their minds to do. They talked about it a great deal together, and Mr. Possum looked over all his stockings to pick out the biggest one he had, and Mr. Crow, he made himself a new pair on purpose. Mr. Coon said he never knew Mr. Crow to make himself such big stockings before, but Mr. Stockings before. Crow said he was getting old and needed things bigger, and when he loaned one of his new stockings to Mr. Coon said, "That's so," and that he guessed they were about right after all. They didn't tell anybody about it at first, but by and by they told Mr. Dog what they were going to do, and when Mr. Dog heard it, he wanted to laugh right out. You see, he knew Santa Claus never went anywhere except to Mr. Man's house, and he thought it would be a great joke on the Hollow Tree people when they hung up their stockings and didn't get anything. But by and by, Mr. Dog thought about something else. He thought it would be too bad, too, for them to be disappointed that way. You see, Mr. Dog liked them all now, and when he had thought about that a minute, he made up his mind to do something. And this is what it was. He made up his mind to play Santa Claus. He knew just how Santa Claus looked, 'cause he'd seen lots of his pictures at Mr. Man's house, and he thought it would be great fun to dress up that way and take a bag of presents to the Hollow Tree while they were all asleep and fill up the stockings of the coon and possum and the old black crow. But first he had to be sure of some way of getting in. So he said to them he didn't see how they could expect Santa Claus. Their chimneys were so small, and Mr. Crow said they could leave their latchstring out downstairs, which was just what Mr. Dog wanted. Then they said they were going to have all the folks that had spent the summer with them over for Christmas dinner, and to see the presents they had got in their stockings. They told Mr. Dog to drop over, too, if he could get away, and Mr. Dog said he would, and went off laughing to himself, and ran all the way home because he felt so pleased at what he was going to do. Well, he had to work pretty hard, I tell you, to get things ready. It wasn't so hard to get the presents as it was to rig up his Santa Claus dress. He found some long wool out in Mr. Man's barn for his white whiskers, and he put some that wasn't so long on the edges of his overcoat and boot tops and around an old hat he had. Then he borrowed a big sack he found out there, too, and fixed it up to swing over his back, just as he had seen Santa Claus do in the picture. He had a lot of nice things to take along. 3 tender young chickens he borrowed from Mr. Man for one thing, and then he bought some new neckties for the Hollow Tree folks all around, and a big striped candy cane for each one, because candy canes always looked well sticking out of a stocking. Besides all that, he had a new pipe for each, and a package of tobacco. You see, Mr. Beachy, dog, lived with Mr. Man, and didn't ever have to buy much for himself, so he had always saved his money. He had even more things than that, but I can't remember just now what they were. And when he started out, all dressed up like Santa Claus, I tell you his bag was pretty heavy, and he almost wished before he got there that he hadn't started with quite so much. It got heavier and heavier all the way, and he was glad enough to get there and find the latch string out. He set his bag down to rest a minute before climbing the stairs, and then opened the doors softly and listened. He didn't hear a thing except Mr. Crow and Mr. Coon and Mr. Possum breathing pretty low, and he knew they might wake up any minute, and he wouldn't have been caught there in the midst of things for a good deal. So he slipped up just as easy as anything, and when he got up in the big parlor room he almost had to laugh right out loud, for there were the stockings sure enough, all hung up in a row, and a card with a name on it over each one telling whom it belonged to. Then he listened again, and all at once he jumped and held his breath, for he heard Mr. Possum say something. But Mr. Possum was only talking in his sleep, and saying, "I'll take another piece, please." And Mr. Dog knew he was dreaming about the mince pie he'd had for supper. So then he opened his bag and filled the stockings. He put in mixed candy and nuts and little things first, and then the pipes and tobacco and candy canes so they'd show at the top, and hung a nice dressed chicken outside. I tell you, they looked fine. It almost made Mr. Dog wish he had a stocking of his own there to fill, and he forgot all about them waking up and sat down in a chair to look at the stockings. It was a nice rocking chair, and over in a dark corner where they wouldn't be apt to see him, even if one of them did wake up and stick his head out of his room. So Mr. Dog felt pretty safe now, anyway. He rocked softly and looked at the nice stockings and thought how pleased they'd be in the morning and how tired he was. You've heard about people being as tired as a dog, and that's just how Mr. Dog felt. He was so tired he didn't feel a bit like starting home, and by, he never did know how it happened, but by and by Mr. Dog went sound asleep right there in his chair with all his Santa Claus clothes on, and there he sat with his empty bag in his hand and the nice full stockings in front of him all night long, even when it came morning and began to get light. Mr. Dog didn't know it. He just slept right on. He was that tired. Then pretty soon the door of Mr. Possum's room opened, and he poked out his head. And just then the door of Mr. Coon's room opened, and he poked out his head. Then the door of the old black crow opened, and out poked his head. They all looked toward the stockings, and they didn't see Mr. Dog or even each other at all. They saw their stockings, though, and Mr. Coon said all at once, "Oh, there's something in my stocking." And then Mr. Crow says, "Oh, there's something in my stocking too." And Mr. Possum says, "Oh, there's something in all our stockings." And with that, they gave a great hurrah all together, and rushed out and grabbed their stockings and turned around just in time to see Mr. Dog jump right straight up out of his chair, for he did not know where he was the least bit in the world. "Oh, there's Santa Claus himself!" they all shouted together and made a rush for their rooms, for they were scared almost to death. But it all dawned on Mr. Dog in a second, and he commenced to laugh and hurrah to think what a joke it was on everybody. And when they heard Mr. Dog laugh, they knew him right away, and they all came up and looked at him, and he had to tell just what he'd done and everything. So they emptied out their stockings on the floor and ate some of the presents and looked at the others until they almost forgot about breakfast, just as children do on Christmas morning. Then Mr. Crow said all at once that he'd make a little coffee, and that Mr. Dog must stay and have some. And by they made him promise to spend the day with them and be there when the Robin and the Squirrel and Mr. Turtle and Jack Rabbit came, which he did. And it was snowing hard outside, which made it a nicer Christmas than if it hadn't been. And when all the others came, they brought presents too. And when they saw Mr. Dog dressed up as Santa Claus and heard how he'd gone to sleep and been caught, they laughed and laughed. And it snowed so hard that they had to stay all night, and after dinner they sat around the fire and told stories. And they had to stay the next night too, and all that Christmas week. And I wish I could tell you all that happened that week, but I can't, because I haven't time. But it was the very nicest Christmas that ever was in the hollow tree or in the big deep woods anywhere. Christmas land, Werner and Anna. In the last house of the village, just where the big forest begins, lived a poor widow with her 2 children, Werner and Anna. The little that grew in her garden, and on her single acre of ground, the milk of the one goat she owned, and the small sum of money she was able to earn were just enough to support the small family. Nor were the children allowed to be idle, but were obliged to help in every way possible. This they were glad to do, enjoying their work, which led them in all directions through the glorious forest. In early spring they gathered the yellow cowslips and the blue anemones to sell in the city, and later the fragrant lilies of the valley that grew in the beechwood. Then came the strawberries glistening red under the leaves, the blueberries and the coral-tinted bilberries growing in the moor, and beautiful mosses and lichens. All these the children cheerily gathered and sent to the city. With the coming of the fall came new labor. Day after day the children went to the woods, picking up dry wood thrown down by the wind. This they carried home and stacked by the side of the hut. Nuts, too, were gathered, put in a bag, and hung in the chimney against Christmas time. Ah, Christmas! That was a magic word, and at its sound the eyes of the children sparkled. And yet the great day brought them very little. A wee little tree with a few candles, some apples and nuts, and 2 gingerbread men. Under the tree for each one, a warm article of clothing for the winter, and if times were very good, a cheap toy or a new slate. That was all. And yet, from those little candles and the golden star at the top of the tree, there came a glorious light that shed its rays throughout the year. A light that shone in the eyes of the children whenever the word Christmas was spoken. Winter had now come, and one evening, as they sat cosily about the stove, their mother told them a beautiful Christmas story. When she had finished, Werner, who had been looking very thoughtful, suddenly asked, "Mother, where does the Christmasman live?" The mother answered, letting the fine thread slip through her fingers, while her spinning wheel hummed a merry tune. "The Christmasman? Behind the forest in the mountains? But no one can find him. Who seeks him wanders about in vain, and the little birds in the trees hop from branch to branch and laugh at him. In the mountains the Christmasman has his gardens, his shops, and his mines. There his busy workmen labor day and night, making lovely Christmas things. In the gardens grow the silver and gold apples and nuts, and the most delicious fruits of marzipan, and in the shops are heaped up thousands and thousands of the most wonderful toys in the world. There are halls filled with beautiful dolls, clad in calico, in wool, in silk, and in velvet." "Ah," said little Anna, and her eyes shone. "And others again are filled with drums and swords and guns, cannon and toy soldiers." "Oh," cried little Werner, and his eyes sparkled. This story impressed him greatly, He could not forget it, and he thought how happy he would be could he but find the way to this wonderland. Once he got as far as the mountains and wandered about there a long time, but could see nothing but valleys and hills and trees. The brooks that ran by him murmured and babbled as brooks always do, but did not betray their secret. The woodpeckers hammered and pecked just as they did elsewhere in the woods, and then flew away. And the squirrels that climbed nimbly up the trees were just like other squirrels that he had seen. He longed for a glimpse of the wonderful Christmas land. If someone would only tell him how to find it, he would surely go. The people of whom he inquired the way laughed at him, and when he told his mother, she too laughed and bade him think no more about it. The story she had told him had been only a fairy tale, but little Werner could not forget the story, though he did not speak of it again. Only to his little sister Anna did he at times confide his thoughts, and together they dreamed dreams and saw visions of that wondrous country, Christmas land. The little bird. One morning, shortly before Christmas, Werner, with his axe on his shoulder, went alone into the forest, for the forester, who liked the well-behaved boy, had this year again permitted him to cut down a little pine tree for their Christmas Eve. The pretty, graceful little tree which the children had already selected stood in rather a lonely spot, far out in the woods, sheltered by a kindly old beech. It was a beautiful, mild winter day, and when Werner at last reached the spot, he sat down on a tree stump to rest. Round about him all was still, as in a lonely church. Only a brooklet murmured softly, and from afar came the shrill cry of a jay. Again he dreamed of the wonderful Christmas land, and the longing to see its glories grew so strong that he cried aloud, "Oh, if only someone could show me the way to Christmas land!" Then from the waves of the brook came clear sounds like rippling laughter. A woodmouse peeped from her house and laughed a wee little laugh, and from the top of the old beech tree came a stirring and a waving, as though she were shaking her head at such folly. But from the little pine tree which stood directly before him, he suddenly heard a sweet, clear chirping. It was a blue titmouse, hopping gaily from branch to branch, incessantly crying, "I know, I know, what do you know?" asked Werner. The little bird threw herself backward from a branch, turning over in the air in the drollest way, then alighting again, cried, "I know the way, I know the way." "Then show me the way," said Werner quickly. Again the little bird began to chirp softly, but the boy understood everything. "You were good to me," said she. "You protected my little children, my 10 little children. I know the way. I'll show you the way. Quick, quick!" And the little thing flew to the nearest bush, then farther, and Werner followed. At first he had comprehended but half of what the bird had said, but at last he remembered that it was a titmouse whose frightened cries had drawn him to the old beech tree last spring. There he saw a jay sitting before the hollow of the tree where the little bird had built her nest, about to seize the naked babies and devour them. The poor little mother was hovering about, trying to defend them, crying piteously. He picked up a stone and threw it so happily that the jay fell to the ground, dead. So now the little titmouse wished to show her gratitude. She kept flying before him from bush to bush toward the source of the brook which came from the mountains. Soon the ground began to rise, and the brook at Werner's feet babbled louder. Then he came to an ascending valley which grew narrower and narrower, while the walls on both sides grew steeper, and at last, when the brook suddenly disappeared behind a projecting rock, Werner saw before him a smooth wall of stone, towering high and crowned with mighty pine trees. The little bird suddenly vanished, but away up in the distance her voice could be faintly heard, crying, "Soon, soon." Werner sat down on a rock and examined the stone wall. It was smooth, had no crevices, and was covered with mosses and gay lichens. He could see nothing more. So he sat and waited. At last he heard a gentle fluttering above him, and a hazelnut fell at his feet. "Take! Take!" cried the little bird. "Crack! Crack!" Werner took the nut and looked at it. He could discover nothing peculiar about it, but when he shook it, it rattled as though something hard were inside. He cracked it and found a dainty golden key. In the meantime, the little bird had flown to the stone wall. Clinging to it with both delicate little feet, she began pecking away so busily among the lichens that the pieces fairly flew. At last she cried, "Here, here." Werner came near and noticed a small, silver-bound keyhole. The golden key fitted exactly into it, and when Werner turned it, a strange, fine, ringing sound came from the stone wall, and a heavy door, that fitted as exactly into its frame as though it had been cut into the rock, swung slowly open. A warm, bluish air came from the opening, and an odor of burning pine needles and of wax candles just blown out was wafted toward him. "Oh, how this smells of Christmas," said little Werner. But the little bird cried, Go in, quick, quick!" Scarcely had Werner, who was just a little frightened, taken a few steps into the gloomy passage, when he felt a draught behind him, and suddenly it grew quite dark, for the door had again silently closed. Now indeed he began to lose courage, for to return was impossible, yet he saw that a faint heart would avail him little. So on he went, groping his way resolutely along the black passage. Christmasland. Soon his path grew brighter, and he stepped out into the strangest country he had ever seen. The air was warm, but not with the warmth of summer, but as it is in heated rooms, and fragrant with many sweet odors. No sun shone in the sky, yet everywhere was an even, tempered brightness. Of the country itself he saw but little, for behind him was the huge wall of rock through which he had entered, and round about him tall bushes bearing the queerest fruits obstructed the view. As he walked along, lost in wonder, he came to a broad avenue that led to a distant building. Bordering this avenue on both sides were great apple trees, on which grew golden and silver apples. Old men who looked like gnomes with their long grey beards, and pretty little children were busily engaged picking these apples and heaping them up in large baskets, many of which stood already filled to the brim with their glittering load. No one paid any attention to little Werner, who, with growing astonishment, directed his steps toward the building in the background, which proved to be a large castle, with towering steeples and gilded domes and roofs. On either side of the avenue lay large fields on which grew low plants. Here, too, everyone was busy gathering and harvesting, and in the different fields, distinguished by different colors according to the plants they bore, he could see gay, dainty figures diligently loading little two-wheeled carts drawn by gold-colored, shaggy ponies. As Werner approached the castle, he noticed a fragrant odor of honey cake growing stronger and stronger, and on looking more closely, he perceived that the entire castle was made of this delectable stuff. The foundation consisted of large blocks, the walls of smooth cakes ornamented in the most enticing way with citron and almonds. Everywhere were exquisite reliefs of marzipan, the balustrades and galleries and balconies of sugar, the beautiful statues of chocolate standing in gilded niches, and the glittering gay windows made of transparent bonbons. Indeed, here was a castle good enough to eat. At the artistic entrance, the handle of the doorbell was of transparent sugar. Werner took heart and pulled with all his might. No bell rang, however, but a voice from within cried, "Kikeriki!" so loud and shrill that the frightened boy stepped hastily back. The cry was repeated again and again, like an echo growing fainter and fainter. losing itself in the interior of the building. Then there was silence. The door now opened softly, and before him stood so strange a creature that had it not lived and moved, Werner would undoubtedly have taken it for a large jumping jack. "By leaf gold and honey cake," said this merry person. "A visitor? Why, that is a most remarkable event." And then, whether from pleasure or astonishment, he threw his limbs repeatedly up over his head, so that it was almost dreadful to see. Swinging his arms and legs back and forth, he asked, "Well, my boy, and what do you want?" "Does the Christmas man live here?" asked little Werner. "Certainly," said the jumping jack, "and his honor is at home, but very busy, very busy." Then he asked the little fellow to follow him, moving along in a queer sidelong manner, swinging his arms and legs incessantly. He led the way through an entrance hall whose walls were made of marzipan and whose ceiling was supported by pillars of polished chocolate, to a door before which two gigantic nutcrackers in full uniform stood guard, told him to wait here, and disappeared. In the meantime, the nutcrackers stared at Werner with their big eyes, then grinned at each other with an indescribable wooden grin, at which there was a funny sound as though they were laughing with their stomachs. Presently the jumping jack returned, made a most beautiful sidelong bow, and said, "My gracious master begs you to enter." Then the nutcrackers, drawing close together, suddenly presented their swords and with their teeth beat a roll that was most extraordinary. When little Werner stepped into the room, he was greatly astonished, for the Christmas man did not look at all as he had imagined him, nor did he resemble the pictures he had seen of him. True, he had a beautiful long white beard, as was proper, but on his head was a blue, gold-embroidered skull-cap, and he wore a dressing-gown of yellow silk and sat before a large book and wrote. But this dressing-gown was covered with such wonderful embroidery that it was like a picture book. On it you could see soldiers and dolls and clowns, and all the animals of Noah's Ark, drums and fifes, violins, trumpets, swords and guns, flowers and cakes, and sun and moon and stars. The Christmasman laid down his pen and said, "How did you get here, my boy?" Werner answered, "The little bird showed me the way." "'T is 100 years since anyone has been here," replied the Christmasman, "and now this little fellow succeeds in coming. Well, your reward shall be that you may see everything. I myself am too busy just now, but my daughter shall be your guide. Come, little gold flame," he cried, "we have a guest." Then in the next room there was a fluttering and a rustling, and in ran a beautiful little girl. She wore a dress of leaf gold, and she glittered and sparkled all over. On her head was a little crown of gold, and on its topmost tip was a gleaming flamelet. "Why, how nice!" she said, and took little Werner by the hand, crying, "Come along, strange boy," and ran with him from the room, the Christmas warehouse. They came to a large corridor where long rows of wooden horses stood tied. There were grey horses and brown horses, chestnut horses and black horses. "You may choose one," said little Goldflame. Werner selected a beautiful, shiny, dapple grey, and Goldflame mounted a coal-black steed. "Hoy!" she cried, and with a whir away rolled the little horses so fast that Werner's hair flew, and the flame on the girl's crown was wafted like a streamer in the air. When they came to the door at the end of the corridor, she cried, "Holla!" It opened, and they rushed through into a big hall, in the middle of which they halted. They dismounted, and little Gold Flame said, "This is the Hall of Lead." Lining the walls to the ceiling were open cupboards filled with shelves on which stood, packed in boxes, countless armies of soldiers, hunters, shepherds, sleighing parties, menageries, and everything possible that could be made of lead. Little black-bearded dwarfs climbed busily up and down ladders, placing the boxes into carts which they rolled outside, where larger wagons waited to be loaded with the toys. As soon as the dwarfs saw Werner and Goldflame, they brought them 2 gold-brocaded easy chairs, and Goldflame said, "The big parade is coming very soon." They sat down, and had barely waited half a minute when from under one of the cupboards came a strange ringing music, and the Prussian guard marched out and filed by with martial strains. Here indeed were toy soldiers that delighted one's heart. How the little fellows strutted, and the dapper lieutenants saluted with their swords. Then came the white cuirassiers with their glittering armour, the red hussars of Potsdam, the lancers with their gleaming flags, the blue dragoons, and last of all the cannon. When these had passed, "Trari! Trara!" sounded from under the cupboard, and deer, rabbits, and foxes burst forth, the yelping pack behind, and the hunters on horseback with huzzah, crack of whip, and sounding of horns. Then all at once something glistened in the air, and fine snow began to fall. When the ground was white, a sleighing party with merry bells ringing came out and rushed by. The fronts of the sleighs were in the form of swans, lions, tigers, and dragons, and in the sleighs sat ladies and gentlemen in beautiful furs. In passing, they threw snowballs at Werner and at little Goldflame. But if you looked closely at one of these snowballs, you found a tiny bonbon wrapped in tissue paper. The snow disappeared, and now with sweet bells ringing came shepherds and shepherdesses with their flocks, then pretty peasants with fruits and flowers, then gypsies, musicians, tinkers, rope-walkers, horseback riders, and such vagrant folk. Last came Mr. Hagenbeck of Hamburg with his African menagerie of giraffes, elephants, rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, zebras, and antelopes. The lions and panthers followed in cages on little wagons and roared mightily, as though insulted at the indignities put upon them. At the close of this jolly parade, both children again mounted their horses and rode on. What marvels were unfolded before little Werner's eyes! The large hall filled with dolls, for which he did not particularly care, and which he only wished Anna might see. The theatre magazine, where at Goldflame's request 1,000 theatres opened at the same time with 1,000 different plays, making a terrible din. The tool chest warehouse, the storeroom for the musical instruments, the wooden animal magazine, the picture department, the paint-box warehouse, the hall of the wax candles, and so on, until he was quite tired out when at last they reached the great candy department. "Now let us eat," said little Goldflame. Immediately 6 little confectioner's apprentices brought a table, set it, and served them with the most delicious dishes. Werner had never tasted such good things. There were Leipzig larks of marzipan filled with nut cream, sausages of quinces, ham made of rosy, creamy sugar, pastry filled with strawberry jam, and all sorts of candied fruits. They had pineapple lemonade with vanilla cream to drink, and behind them stood the 6 little waiters, eager to serve, running to fill every order. For dessert they were to have, as Goldflame remarked, something quite superlatively fine, dry black bread and cheese. Such ordinary dishes were so rare in this country and so difficult to obtain that they were considered the greatest delicacies. When they had finished eating, the wooden horses were again brought out, and Goldflame said, "Now we will visit the mines." So, mounting their excellent steeds, away they rode. The mines. They rode over fields on which grew the most exquisite fruits and vegetables, all of sugar or chocolate filled with cream. They galloped along stately avenues bordered with fruit trees, toward the mountains which lay before them. Some of these gleamed white as chalk, others looked dull and dark, almost black, but the tops of even the black mountains were as white as though snow-capped. "Perhaps you think you see snow," said little Goldflame. "But when it snows here, it only snows powdered sugar." Werner now saw before him a high, shining white rock on which hundreds of men were working. They rode quite close and dismounted. "This is the great sugar quarry," said Goldflame. "This entire rock consists of the finest white colonial sugar." Quite near them, they observed an entrance to a cave, and as they approached it, several miners hurried toward them with torches and led the way. They penetrated deep into the mountain, whose walls shimmered and shone in the reflected torchlight. Presently, they stepped into a magnificent chamber whose walls, covered with huge crystals of transparent rock candy, glittered and sparkled in the light of the torches. "This is the large rock candy cavern," said little Goldflame. They went on and came to a place where the miners were knocking and hammering and working new passages into the mountains. "These men are looking for melted sugar, and when they find it, they scoop it out with huge spoons," she said. Suddenly, as they proceeded, they beheld mountains, no longer white and shining, but dull, dark brown, and smelling of vanilla. "We are now approaching the chocolate mines," explained little Goldflame. "Here many people were at work, tunneling into the mountains, for it was only in the interior that the best vanilla chocolate was found. They passed through great chambers, supported here and there by single pillars left standing. When at last they again stepped into the open air, Werner noticed a roaring brook that came from a ravine in the mountains and rushed toward the valley, where it turned the mills that sawed the chocolate blocks into cakes. "Would you like to have a drink?" said little Goldflame. "It tastes good. It is pure liqueur." Little Werner was so very thirsty after all the sweets he had eaten and seen, and from the brook came so fresh and enticing an odor, that he seized the cup eagerly, which an obliging miner handed him, and emptied it at a single draught. But scarcely had he finished when the world began to turn about him in the queerest way. He saw 2 gold flames, 4 gold flames, 100 gold flames, glittering and gleaming before him, then flowing together into a shining sea of light, carrying away his senses, and he knew nothing more. Conclusion. The first sound that Werner heard on awakening was the chirping of a titmouse. He was astonished to find himself sitting on a stump under the old beech tree with the little pine tree in front of him. The titmouse hopped from branch to branch and chirped, but Werner no longer understood what she said. It suddenly occurred to him that it must be very late, that his mother had surely been anxiously waiting for him. But looking up at the sun, he was astonished to find that scarcely a quarter of an hour had passed since he had left this spot. He could not account for this mystery, but eager to relate his wonderful experiences to his mother and little Anna, he cut down the pine tree and hurried home with his burden as fast as he could. When, with shining eyes and breathless haste, he had told them his story, his mother grew quite angry and told him not to dare fall asleep again in the woods in winter. Had the weather been colder, it might have been his death. But afterwards she shook her head, saying to herself, "Where does the boy get all his strange fancies?" Little Werner wept because his mother did not believe him and went away, but Hannah followed, eager to hear more. She never tired of hearing about Goldflame and the Hall of Dolls, and in the days that followed he had to tell her about them over and over again, until he was quite comforted. One day they went to the woods together to look for the entrance to that wonderful country, but though they followed the brooklet, they never found a place resembling in the least the description Werner had given, and he was so ashamed and embarrassed. He knew not what to say, and so Christmas drew near. A heavy snow had been falling for 2 whole days, and the world was beautiful, wrapped in its glistening, white Christmas robe. Night was falling, and the children sat in their dark chamber, eagerly waiting, whispering together, and listening to their mother, who was walking back and forth in the brightly lighted Christmas room, arranging their poor little gifts. Suddenly, from afar, They heard the jingling of sleigh bells coming nearer and nearer, and a whip cracked merrily. Now the sleigh was quite close. Now it stopped before the house. They could hear the horses stamping and the bells jingling softly when the animals turned their heads. "The Christmas man! The Christmas man!" cried Werner. They heard doors opening and a man's voice speaking. Then their mother called to them, "Come in, children, your uncle is here." Wemmer and Anna ran into the room, and there stood a man in a great fur coat who held out his hands to them, saying, "Come to me, my dear children." He kissed each one and said, "You shall come with me to the city and live with me in my large house. I will be a father to you, and I will care for you." In the meantime, a gigantic coachman with a fur cap, a long white beard, and a cloak with 7 collars was bringing many large packages into the room. When these were afterwards opened, they contained so many beautiful gifts that the people in that little house had a Christmas such as they had never had before. Later, when Werner and Anna went to bed, he whispered to her very mysteriously, "Do you know who the coachman was, with the fur cap, the long white beard, and the big cloak? That was the Christmas man. Indeed, I recognized him, and he looked at me and winked." But what had happened to the rich old uncle who lived alone, an unsociable miser, and who had never given his poor sister and her children a thought? What had happened to him to change him so? In the night following the day on which Werner had visited the Christmas man, the uncle had had a strange dream. A man with a blue velvet cap and a long white beard, wrapped in a golden robe, suddenly stood before him, looked at him with great blue penetrating eyes, then spoke slowly and impressively. "Conrad Borodin, have you a sister?" Thereupon fear overcame him, so that he could not answer. Then the apparition gradually vanished, the eyes only gazing threateningly upon him. 3 successive nights he had the same dream. In the meantime, a restlessness beyond description drove him from room to room of his dreary, empty house, and ever in his ear there sounded that deep, reproachful voice of his dream, saying, "Have you a sister?" On the morning after the 3rd night he could endure it no longer, but hurried to the city, where, to the astonishment of all the people who had known him as a miser, he bought the loveliest things, ordered a sleigh, filled it with his purchases, and drove directly to his poor sister. Little Werner received a good education and grew to be a famous and highly respected man. He himself told me this story, Cosette's Christmas Eve. A long time ago, Montfermeil was a peaceful and charming little village in the woods, away from the main roads and on the way to nowhere. There the people lived frugally and happily, their simple peasant life. Only water was hard to get, because the hill was high. It was necessary to go a long way for it. Indeed, it was hard for each family to get enough for use. This was the terror of little Cosette. Cosette was a little girl who had been left by her mother several years before in the care of an innkeeper and his wife named Thénardier. She had proved very useful to these people in 2 ways. They were regularly paid by the mother for her care, and they used her as a servant. Thus it was that it was Cosette's task to fetch water when needed. As she was terribly afraid of going at night to the spring, she took good care to have plenty of water in the house at all times. Christmas of the year 1823 had been particularly fine at Montfermeil. There had been neither hail nor snow. This Christmas Eve, several men were sitting around a table in the lower hall of the inn. Cosette was in her usual place on the crosspiece of the kitchen table near the chimney. She was in rags. She had wooden shoes on her little bare feet, and she was knitting stockings by the light of the fire. These stockings were to be worn by the innkeeper's little daughters. Cosette was dreaming sad dreams. Although she was only 8 years old, she had suffered so much that she felt like an old woman. She was thinking that it was night, dark night, and that she had had to fill so many pitchers that day for the many guests in the inn that the water tank was quite empty. She took comfort, however, when she remembered that people drank very little water at night. There were many thirsty ones, of course, but they wanted wine. From time to time, one of the guests would look out into the street and exclaim, "It's as black as an oven. Only a cat could find its way tonight without a lantern." Then Cosette trembled. Suddenly a peddler who was staying at the inn entered and said in a hard voice, "My horse has had no water to drink." Cosette came out from under the table. "Oh, yes, sir," she said. "The horse has had water, a whole pailful, for I gave it to him myself, and I talked to him too." "Come now," said the peddler, "it can't be true that my horse has had enough water." Cosette slipped back to her place under the table. "Indeed, if that's so," said Madame Thénardier, "if the horse has not had enough water, he must drink." Then, looking about the room, she said, "Well, where is Cosette?" She stooped and saw the child hidden at the other end of the table, almost under the men's feet. "Are you going to come, or no?" cried she. Cosette crept out of the little hole in which she had hidden herself. "Now, get something for the horse to drink." "But there isn't any water," said Cosette feebly. The woman opened wide the door leading to the street. "Very well, go and get some." Then she fumbled in a drawer where were a few coins and some peppers and onions. "Here, you little toad," added she, "on your way home, get a loaf of bread. Here is the money." Cosette had a little side pocket in her apron. She took the piece of silver without a word and put it into the pocket. Then she stood quite still, the pail in her hand and the open door before her. "Get along with you!" cried the woman. Cosette went out. The door was closed behind her. Cosette went along the crooked and deserted streets on that side of the town. As long as there were houses or even high walls on both sides of her, she walked bravely enough. From time to time she caught sight of a lighted candle through a crack in the shutters. There were light and life and people, and this comforted her. However, the farther she went, the more slowly she walked. When she had passed the corner of the last house, Cosette stopped. To pass the last shop had been hard, but to pass the last house, this was impossible. She turned firmly back. Scarcely had she walked 100 steps when she stopped again. The thought of Madame Thénardier stopped her. Before her stood the picture of the angry woman, behind her all the phantoms of the night and of the wood. Suddenly, she turned again to the path to the spring and started to run. Even while running, she felt like crying. The chill of the night and of the forest encompassed her. There were only 7 or 8 minutes from the edge of the woods to the spring. Cosette knew the path only too well, having been over it many times every day. She dared not glance either right or left for fear of seeing things in the branches or the bushes. At last she reached the spring. Cosette did not stop to take breath. It was fearfully dark, but she was used to this spring. She felt with her left hand in the darkness for a young oak that hung over it, by which she used to support herself, found the branch, caught hold of it, and plunged the pail into the water. While doing this, she could not see that her pocket had emptied itself into the spring. The silver coin had fallen into the water. Cosette did not notice it. She drew up the pail almost full and rested it on the grass. She shut her eyes, then opened them again, not knowing why. Then she counted aloud 1, 2, 3, and up to 10, and when she had finished, she began again. Then she felt the cold in her hands, which she had wet in dipping the water. Suddenly, she saw the pail before her. She seized the handle with both hands. It was hard to lift. She had to stop many times to rest. Then she walked on with her head bent forward. The weight of the pail stiffened her little arms. All this was taking place in the heart of a wood, at night. in winter, far from every human eye, and this was a child only 8 years old. Now and then she would cry aloud, "Oh dear me! Oh dear me!" Suddenly she felt that the pail was no longer heavy. A hand, which seemed immense, had seized the handle and lifted it with power. She looked up. A large form, dark and straight, was walking beside her in the gloom. It was a man who had come behind her, whom she had not heard. This man, without a word, had taken hold of the pail she was carrying. There are instincts for all the meetings of life. The child felt no fear. The man spoke to her. His voice was grave and almost a whisper. "Little one, it is very heavy for you, this thing you are carrying." Cosette looked up and said, "Yes, sir." "Give it to me," replied the man. "I am going to carry it." Cosette let go of the pail. The man walked beside her. "It is heavy indeed," he said between his teeth. Then he asked, "Little one, how old are you?" "8 years, sir." The man waited a moment before speaking, then said quickly, "You haven't, then, any mother?" "I don't know," said the child. Before the man could say any more, she added, "I don't think so. The others have one, but I haven't any." After a silence, she said again, "I don't believe I ever had one." The man stopped. He placed the pail on the ground, stooped over, and put his hands on the child's shoulders, trying to see her face in the darkness. "What is your name?" said he. "Cosette." The man seemed to feel an electric shock. He looked at her again. Then he took his hands from her shoulders, raised the pail, and began to walk again. After a moment he asked, "Little one, where do you live?" "At Montfermeil." "If you know it." Again there was a pause. Then he began again. "Who is it, then? Who has sent you at this hour to bring water from this wood?" "It's Madame Thénardier." "What does she do, your Madame Thénardier?" "She takes care of me," said the child. "She keeps the inn." "The inn," said the man. "Well, I am going to sleep there tonight. Show me the way." "We are going there now," said the child. The man was walking quite fast. Cosette followed him without any trouble. She wasn't tired anymore. Every now and then she looked up at this man with a wonderful peace and trust. Several minutes passed thus. Then the man began again. "Hasn't Madame Thénardier any servant?" "No, sir." "Are you the only one?" "Yes, sir." There was another pause. Then Cosette raised her voice. "That is, there are 2 little girls." "What little girls?" "Ponine and Zelma." "Who are Ponine and Zelma?" "They are Madame Thénardier's little girls." "And what do they do, these little ones?" "Oh," said the child, "they have pretty dolls. They play and amuse themselves." "And you?" "I? I? I work? All day long?" The child raised her large eyes full of tears that were hidden by the night and answered softly, "Yes, sir." Then she went on after a moment of silence, "Sometimes, when I have done my work and they are willing, I play a little." "So, what do you play?" "As I can. They leave me alone. But I have not many toys. I have only a little lead sword not larger than that." The child showed her little finger. They were now nearing the village. Cosette led the stranger through the street. They passed the baker's, but Cosette never even thought of the bread that she was to buy. As they came near the inn, Cosette touched his arm timidly. "What is it, little one?" "Here we are, very near the house." An instant later they were at the door of the inn. Cosette could not resist one last look at a big doll standing in the window of the toy shop. Then she knocked. The door opened. Madame Thénardier stood there, a candle in her hand. "Ah, it's you! You have taken time enough. You must have been having a fine time." "Madame," said Cosette, trembling. "Here is a gentleman who has come to stay." Madame Thénardier changed very quickly her cross looks for her pleasing grin, and looked eagerly at the newcomer. "This is the gentleman?" said she. "Yes, madame," answered the man as he touched his cap. "Rich travellers are not so polite." This gesture, and the view of the clothes and the bundle of the stranger, which the woman took in with a quick glance, made her change her pleasant grin for her cross looks again. Then she said dryly, "Come in, fellow." The fellow came in. The woman took another glance at him, looked carefully at his coat, which was very shabby, and at his hat, which was quite battered. Then turned up her nose and winked her eyes at her husband, who was sitting with the other men. Then he answered with a movement of his finger on the lips, which said as plainly as words, "Very poor." Then the woman cried at once, "Ah, my good fellow, I am very sorry, but I have no room for you." "Put me anywhere you like," said the man, "in the barn or the stable. I will pay as if I had a room. 2 francs, 15? Yes, 2 francs. Very well." Meanwhile the man, having left his bundle and stick on a bench, had taken his seat at a table where Cosette had hurried to place a bottle of wine and a glass. The peddler who had asked for the water had gone himself to take it to the horse. Cosette had taken her place under the kitchen table with her knitting. The stranger, who had hardly touched the wine that he had poured out, was looking at the child with strange attention. Cosette was homely. Happy? She might have been pretty. No, she was thin and pale. She was nearly 8 years old, but one would have guessed her hardly 6. The whole figure of this child, her manner, her way of moving, the sound of her voice, the stammering speech, her look, her silence, her least gesture, expressed one single idea: fear. This fear was so great that on reaching the inn, wet as she was, Cosette had not dared to dry herself at the fire, but had gone quietly to work. The stranger did not take his eyes away from Cosette. Suddenly Madame Thénardier cried, "Well now, where is the bread?" Cosette, as she always did when her mistress raised her voice, came quickly from under the table. She had entirely forgotten the bread. She did, alas! What many children do when frightened, she lied. "Madam, the baker shop was closed." "I will find out tomorrow if this is so," said the woman. "And if you are lying, I will make you pay for it. Meanwhile, give me the money." Cosette put her hand into her apron pocket. The money was not there. "Look here, do you hear me?" said her mistress. Cosette turned her pocket out. There was nothing there. What could have become of the money? "Have you lost it, the money?" screamed the woman. "Or do you want to steal it from me?" Meanwhile the stranger had fumbled in his vest pocket without being noticed by anyone. Cosette was crouching in the corner of the chimney. "Pardon me, madame," said the man, "but just a moment ago I saw something bright roll on the floor. Perhaps it was the money." At the same time he stooped down and seemed to be searching the floor. "Exactly so. Here it is," said he, rising, and he handed the woman a piece of money. "Yes, that is it," said she. It was not the money, for this coin was larger, but the woman thought it all the better for that. She put it into her pocket and contented herself with a fierce look at the child, saying, "See that this does not happen again." Cosette went back again into what the woman called her kennel. "By the way, do you wish supper?" said she to the stranger. He did not reply. He seemed to be thinking deeply. "What sort of man is this?" she said between her teeth. "He is humbly poor. He has not a cent for supper. I hope he will pay me for his lodging." Just then a door opened, and Eponine and Azelma came in. They were really 2 pretty and charming little girls, one with golden brown curls, the other with long black braids falling down her back. When they entered, their mother said in a scolding tone which nevertheless was full of adoration, "Ah, here you are, you two. Then drawing them on her lap one after the other, smoothing their hair, tying their ribbons, she at last gave each a little love pat, saying, "Aren't they well dressed now?" They went and sat down near the corner of the chimney. They had a doll which they turned and turned again on their knees with all sorts of happy prattling. From time to time, Cosette raised her eyes from her knitting and looked at them sadly. The doll of the two sisters was very faded and quite old and broken, but it did not seem any the less lovely to Cosette, who, in all her life, had never owned a doll, a real doll, to use a term that all children will understand. Suddenly the woman, who was passing back and forth in the room, noticed that Cosette was distracted, and that instead of working she was interested in the little ones who were playing. "Ah, I have caught you," cried she. "That's how you work." The stranger, without leaving his chair, turned to the woman. "Madame," said he, smiling almost timidly, "let the little one play a bit." She replied sharply, "She must work if she wants to eat. I don't feed her to do nothing." "What is she making then?" said the stranger, with a soft voice which was such a contrast to his shabby clothes and his big broad shoulders. "Stockings, if you please, stockings for my little girls, who have none, and who will soon be barefooted." The man looked at Cosette's poor little red feet and went on, "When will she finish this pair of stockings? She will take 3 or 4 days more, the idle thing. And how much will they be worth when they are done?" The woman looked at him with scorn. "At least 30 sous," she said. "Would you sell them for 5 francs?" said the man. "Mercy on us!" cried out with a hoarse laugh one of the guests who was listening. "5 francs? You bet your life! 5 francs!" Monsieur Thénardier thought it was time for him to say something. "Yes, sir, if this is your fancy, you may have the stockings for 5 francs. We never refuse travellers anything." "You must pay it right down," said the woman in her short and commanding way. "I buy this pair of stockings," answered the man, as he drew 5 francs from his pocket and laid them on the table, "and I pay for them." Then he turned to Cosette. "Now your work belongs to me. Play, my little one." Cosette now laid down her knitting, but she had not left her place. Cosette always moved as little as possible. She had taken from a box behind her a few old rags and a little lead sword, and Cosette had made herself a doll with the sword. Meanwhile, the guests at the table were singing their songs more and more loudly. Cosette, under the table, was looking at the fire which was shining in her fixed eyes. She had begun to rock the sort of doll she had made, and as she rocked it back and forth she sang. All at once Cosette stopped. She had turned and caught sight of the doll that the children had left for the cat, and which was lying on the floor near the table. Then she let fall her little sword doll, which only half pleased her, and turned her eyes slowly around the room. The woman was talking to her husband and counting money, the girls were playing with the cat, the travellers were eating and singing, and not one of them was looking at her. She did not have a moment to lose. She crawled out from under the table on her hands and knees, looked again to see that no one was watching, then slipped quickly over to the doll and seized it. An instant later she was in her place, seated, quiet, and turned so that the doll was in shadow. This happiness of playing with the doll was so rare for her that she was wild with joy. Not a soul had seen her except the stranger, who was now eating a simple supper. Her joy lasted almost a quarter of an hour, but in spite of all her care, Cosette did not see that one leg of the doll was sticking out, and that the fire from the chimney lighted it brightly. This red and shining leg coming out of the shadow suddenly struck the eye of Azelma, who said to Éponine, "Look there, sister!" The 2 little girls stopped, amazed. Cosette had dared take their doll. Éponine got up, and without leaving the cat, ran over to her mother and began to pull her skirt. "Let me alone," said the mother. "What do you want? "Mother," said the child, "look there." And she pointed her finger at Cosette. The woman cried in a voice hoarse with anger, "Cosette!" Cosette shivered as if the earth had trembled under her. She turned around. "Cosette!" repeated the woman. Cosette took the doll and laid it on the floor with a sort of reverence mingled with despair. Then, without taking her eyes away from it, she joined her hands and burst into tears. In the meantime, the stranger had risen. "What is the matter?" said he to the woman. "Don't you see?" said she, pointing with her finger at the proof of the crime outstretched at Cosette's feet. "Well, what of that?" replied the man. "This little wretch has dared to lay her hands on the children's doll." "All this noise about that?" said the man. "Why should she not play with this doll?" "She has touched it with her dirty hands." At this Cosette sobbed more than ever. "Keep still, won't you?" cried the woman. The man went straight to the street door, opened it, and went out. In a few minutes the door opened again, and the man entered, carrying in his arms the wonderful doll of which we have spoken. He laid it down before Cosette, saying, "Take it, little one, this is for you." It seemed that during the hour he had been there, in the midst of his musing, he had noticed the toy shop, so brilliantly lighted that it could be easily seen through the hall window. Cosette raised her eyes. She had looked upon the man coming to her with this doll as she would have looked upon the sun. She heard the unusual words, "This is for you." She looked at him. She looked at the doll. Then she backed slowly away and went and hid herself on the floor under the other table in the corner of the wall. "Well now, Cosette," said the woman in a voice that she tried to make soft, "why don't you take your doll?" Cosette had not the courage to creep out of her hole. "My little Cosette," said the woman in a caressing tone, "take it, it is yours." Cosette looked at the doll almost in terror. Her face was still wet with tears, but her eyes began to glow like the skies at early dawn with strange rays of joy. What she felt at that moment was a little like what she would have felt if someone had suddenly said to her, "Little one, you are Queen of France." It seemed to her that if she touched this doll, thunder would come out of it. At last she came near it, and murmured timidly as she looked at the woman,
"May I take it then?"
"Yes, indeed," said the woman. "It is yours. The gentleman has given it to you."
"Is it true?"
"Sir, is it really true that this lovely lady is mine?" Suddenly she turned and seized the doll with delight. "I'll call you Catherine," she cried. That was a queer sight when the rags of little Cosette touched and covered up the doll's pink ribbons and silk. "Madame," said she, "may I put her on a chair?" "Yes, my dear," said the woman. She placed Catherine on a chair, then seated herself on the floor in front of her, and kept perfectly quiet, without one word, in an attitude of devotion. "Play now, Cosette," said the stranger. "Yes, I am playing," said the child. The woman now hastened to send her children to bed. Then she begged permission to send Cosette too. Cosette went to bed, taking her Catherine with her. "Going to meet Christmas, Papa," said the man mite. "Can you hear Christmas? Can you hear Christmas?" repeated his papa. "Why, I suppose so, in a sort of way. You can hear bells chiming and little boys drumming and little girls blowing horns and people laughing and everybody saying, 'Merry Christmas.' I suppose that's hearing Christmas, isn't it?" "But I mean, can you hear it before it's here?" asked the man mite. "No, I think not," answered Papa. "Well, if you can't hear it, how can you tell it's coming? Can you see it coming?" "Oh," answered his papa, "I see what you mean now. Well, how can you tell tomorrow is coming? Can you smell it?" The man mite laughed. "Such a silly papa. Tomorrow has to come so that today can be yesterday. You explained that to me once yourself." "Yes." "Well, Christmas has to come so that next Christmas can be last Christmas." "Oh, Papa, cried the man-mite. "You forgot about this Christmas. But please don't tell me when this Christmas is coming, because I want it to surprise me. I want it to sneak right up and get here when I don't know it." "All right," laughed Papa. "I shan't tell, and you can go to bed every night for a week hoping that the next day will be Christmas." Which was exactly what the man-mite did, and for a night or two it was very exciting, but toward the end of the week he began to grow tired of it. It was all very well to go to bed hoping that the next day would be Christmas, but to wake up every morning and ask, "Where is Christmas?" only to be answered with, "Christmas is coming," was very disappointing. One night, his papa and mamma insisted that he go to bed earlier than usual, so he was very wide awake for a while and lay there wondering how he could hurry up Christmas. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine how Christmas looked, dilly-dallying along the way, as he remembered with shame. He himself did sometimes when he was sent upon an errand, instead of hastening as Christmas and a little boy ought to do. "Christmas is coming! Christmas is coming!" he repeated to himself. "And if it doesn't hurry and hurry up? If it doesn't hurry and hurry up, I'll go to meet it." That was a new idea, and the man-mite lingered on it lovingly. Go to meet it? Why not? Just how he got himself dressed and out of the house he never distinctly remembered. He afterwards said that he was in such a hurry he didn't have time to remember, but that doesn't sound quite reasonable, does it? He also says, however, that he remembers running for a long time as fast as he could go. When he stopped to take breath and to look around, he found he was in a strange part of the city and there was nobody in the street in any direction. He was lost! The man-mite remembered that his papa told him that if ever he was lost, he should ask a policeman. But there wasn't a policeman or anybody else in sight. On the corner, though, was a patroon box, and the man-mite had seen the policeman telephone to the station from the box, so he thought he would do the same thing. As he was trying to open the door, he was startled to hear a voice inside exclaim, "Christmas is coming." "Which way is it coming, please?" asked the man-mite, and off popped the top and up popped a jack-in-the-box with his arms extended. "Thank you," said the man-mite, and hastened away in the direction the jack-in-the-box had pointed. Presently he saw a toy trolley car going in the same direction. "Hello," he said, "where is that car going?" "Going to meet Christmas?" answered the trolley car. "Get inside." "Thank you," answered the man-mite. "You're most too small for me to get inside of, but I can sit on top." He did so, and the car took him to the end of the line, and he was his own conductor and collected his own fare from himself. When the car stopped, it was at the end of a street which ran up against a steep bluff with no elevator or path to help a little boy to get to its top. The man-mite wondered how he was ever going to get past that bluff when he saw a climbing monkey on a string. One end of his string was attached to the top of the bluff, and the other was fastened to the ground below. "Hello," said the monkey. "Christmas is coming, and if you want to go to meet it, you would better crawl up my string. I'll show you how." "Oh, I can't," said the man-mite. "Can't?" mocked the monkey. "I'm only a tin monkey, and I can do it. It's easy." He went up the string, hand over hand, and foot over foot, and the man-mite followed. Much to his surprise, he reached the top without any difficulty, and there he found a toy train of cars, a toy automobile, and a wooden wagon. "All aboard for the Christmas Limited," said the little iron brakeman. "Automobile air, line to Santa Clausville," said the tin chauffeur. "Fast express going to meet Christmas," cried the tongue of the wagon. And the man-mite noticed that the wagon did have express printed on both its sides. Now, although the man-mite would have liked to go on the train or the auto, there was so much more room in the wooden wagon that he got into it, and was surprised that it soon left its companions far behind. It sped along merrily, and its tongue kept up a continuous running talk as well, until it came to the ocean, where a toy boat was floating. "All aboard for Christmas," said the captain. "But your boat is too small, and besides there's not a board in it, it's tin," answered the man-mite. "Well, throw us a line and we'll tow you," said the captain. As the man-mite had no line, he let him take the tongue of the wagon, and the captain stood at the stern of the boat and hung on. Though the boat was so small, it pulled the man-mite through the water in a surprising manner, and the wooden wagon floated and kept the man-mite dry. But not a word could he get out of it, which was quite a contrast to its manner when on land. The weather kept getting colder and colder. Presently the boat was stuck fast in the ice. Of course the wagon was also frozen tight, and the captain let go of the line, as he called it. "There!" cried the wagon angrily. "I knew what you'd bring us into." "Well, why didn't you say so if you knew so much?" said the captain. "Say so? Could you say so if somebody was pulling you along by the tongue?" demanded the wagon. The captain replied, and the wagon retorted, and the quarrel was becoming very unpleasant, when along came a pair of skates without anybody on them. "Boat ahoy! Wagon ahoy! Boy ahoy!" cried the skates. "Christmas is coming. Take me along to meet it, please," asked the man-mite, and in another moment he was on the skates and skating faster and easier than he had ever skated in his life before. He skated for a long time, and past fields where plum puddings were growing like pumpkins, trees where candy boys hung like pears, and snowdrifts, which upon closer acquaintance proved to be huge frosted cakes. Curiously enough, fields and trees and drifts were all moving and cried out, "We're going to meet Christmas!" After what seemed to him a long time, much to his surprise and joy, he met a boy, seemingly of his own age. The man-mite was almost sure he had seen his face before, and yet, when he came to look at him again, he was surer still that he hadn't. For certainly he had never seen a boy with a fur cap, fur coat, fur boots, and fur trousers. He noticed, too, that while the boy's face was round and chubby, his hair was white, not merely tow-headed like Willie Perkins's and Pete Judson's, but pure white. "Hello," said the stranger. "What's your name?" "They call me Man-mite. What's yours?" "Santy? Santy? What a funny name. Santy what?" "Santy Claus." "Santy Claus?" cried the man-mite. "You can't be Santy Claus. He's a man, and you're just a little boy like I am." "Oh, you're thinking of my father," answered the boy. "Your father?" cried the man-mite, more astonished than ever. Somehow he had never thought of the possibility of Santy Claus being a father. "Have you got a mother too?" he asked after a moment. "Yep. Had one ever since I was born. Ain't you?" "Of course," answered the man-mite. "But I never heard of Mrs. Santy Claus." "Never heard of your mother neither," answered Santy Junior. "Say now, ain't you fooling me? Are you honestly Santy Claus's little boy?" "Say yourself," answered the other. "Doesn't your father remember when he was little he had a Santy Claus?" "Yes." "Didn't your father's father have a Santy Claus?" "I suppose so." "Well, do you suppose it's the same Santy Claus? Somebody's got to keep the business going." "And will you be Santy Claus, the real Santy Claus, when you grow up?" asked the man-mite. "I suppose so," answered the other carelessly. "You suppose so. Don't you want to be?" "No, I want to be the conductor on a dog train." "Say, they made the run this year in 3 months and 2 days. Wasn't that flying?" It really didn't seem fast to the man-mite, so he said, "How far is it?" "From Arctic Sea to Aurora B." "What do you mean by Arctic Sea? And Aurora B?" "Arctic Circle to Aurora Borealis, of course. That run was an excursion too." We always go to the Aurora Bee for the 4th. Fine fireworks there. The 4th? Do you celebrate the 4th? Of course. But you're not Americans, are you? No? That's the worst of it. We got to celebrate everything. Holidays and saints' days and kings' and queens' birthdays and the whole bunch. That's because we belong to all nations. Christmas is the best, isn't it? Smiled the man-mite. Worst of the lot, said Santa Junior shortly. Why, what makes you think so? Cried the man-mite. 'Cause Dad's always away on Christmas, and we've cleared everything out of the house to the last ginger snap to put in folks' stockings, and it's the middle of the night. And everybody's tired, just like I am now, and wants to go to bed. Middle of the night? What do you mean? Middle of the North Pole night. If it wasn't for Christmas, we could go to bed about 1/2 October and sleep until 1/4 of May. But Ma thinks we ought to help Pa and then wait up till he comes home. My, but I'm sleepy, ain't you? Yes, owned the man-mite a little. Well, come on and sleep with me. Your mother won't mind. You can get up about 1/4 past April and get home early. While they were speaking, Santa Junior was leading the way into the house and to his room. The two boys lay down together on a bed of bearskins, and the man-mite said sleepily, Say, will you please tell me something? Uh-huh, said Santy. What makes your hair white? What makes a polar bear's hair white? What makes an Arctic fox's hair white? What makes an Arctic hare's hair white? Why, hello! There's Dad coming back. Coming back from where? Why, from Christmas, of course. You do ask the funniest questions. I believe you're asleep. Your eyes are shut, and you talk so stupid. The mite man rubbed his eyes with both hands and strove to open them. Then he heard a voice cry, Papa! Papa! But instead of its being the voice of Santy Jr., as he expected, it was the voice of his brother Ben. Then somebody kissed him and called, Merry Christmas! Oh, Papa, said the man-mite as he opened his eyes. Is it this Christmas or next Christmas? He did not stop for an answer to his question. With a shout of joy, he sprang out of bed and darted upon a pair of skates, a toy steamboat, a wooden wagon marked Express. On both sides, and a toy trolley car, which was big enough for him to sit upon the roof. Kidnapping Santa Claus. Santa Claus lives in the Laughing Valley, where stands the big rambling castle in which his toys are manufactured. His workmen, selected from the Ryls, Nooks, Pixies, and Fairies, live with him, and everyone is as busy as can be from one year's end to another. It is called the Laughing Valley, because everything there is happy and gay. The brook chuckles to itself as it leaps rollicking between its green banks. The wind whistles merrily in the trees. The sunbeams dance lightly over the soft grass, and the violets and wildflowers look smilingly up from their green nests. To laugh, one needs to be happy. To be happy, one needs to be content. And throughout the Laughing Valley of Santa Claus, contentment reigns supreme. On one side is the mighty forest of Burzee. At the other side stands the huge mountain that contains the caves of the demons, and between them the valley lies smiling and peaceful. One would think that our good old Santa Claus, who devotes his days to making children happy, would have no enemies on all the earth. And, as a matter of fact, for a long period of time he encountered nothing but love wherever he might go. But the demons who live in the mountain caves grew to hate Santa Claus very much, and all for the simple reason that he made children happy. The caves of the demons are 5 in number. A broad pathway leads up to the first cave, which is a finely arched cavern at the foot of the mountain, the entrance being beautifully carved and decorated. In it resides the demon of selfishness. Back of this is another cavern inhabited by the demon of envy. The cave of the demon of hatred is next in order, and through this one passes to the home of the demon of malice, situated in a dark and fearful cave in the very heart of the mountain. I do not know what lies beyond this. Some say there are terrible pitfalls leading to death and destruction, and this may very well be true. However, from each one of the 4 caves mentioned, there is a small, narrow tunnel leading to the 5th cave, a cozy little room occupied by the demon of repentance. And as the rocky floors of these passages are well worn by the track of passing feet, I judge that many wanderers in the caves of the demons have escaped through the tunnels to the abode of the demon of repentance, who is said to be a pleasant sort of fellow who gladly opens for one a little door, admitting you into fresh air and sunshine again. Well, these demons of the caves, thinking they had great cause to dislike old Santa Claus, held a meeting one day to discuss the matter. "I'm really getting lonesome," said the demon of selfishness, "for Santa Claus distributes so many pretty Christmas gifts to all the children that they become happy and generous through his example and keep away from my cave." "I am having the same trouble," rejoined the demon of envy. "The little ones seem quite content with Santa Claus, and there are few indeed that I can coax to become envious." "And that makes it bad for me," declared the demon of hatred, "for if no children pass through the caves of selfishness and envy, none can get to my cavern." "Or to mine," added the demon of malice. "For my part," said the demon of repentance, "it is easily seen that if children do not visit your caves, they have no need to visit mine, so I am quite as neglected as you are." "And all because of this person they call Santa Claus," exclaimed the demon of envy. "He is simply ruining our business, and something must be done at once." To this they readily agreed. But what to do was another and more difficult matter to settle. They knew that Santa Claus worked all through the year at his castle in the Laughing Valley, preparing the gifts he was to distribute on Christmas Eve. And at first they resolved to try to tempt him into their caves, that they might lead him on to the terrible pitfalls that ended in destruction. So the very next day, while Santa Claus was busily at work, surrounded by his little band of assistants, the demon of selfishness came to him and said, "These toys are wonderfully bright and pretty. Why do you not keep them for yourself? It's a pity to give them to those noisy boys and fretful girls who break and destroy them so quickly." "Nonsense," cried the old greybeard, his bright eyes twinkling merrily as he turned toward the tempting demon. "The boys and girls are never so noisy or fretful after receiving my presents, and if I could make them happy for one day in the year, I am quite content." So the demon went back to the others who awaited him in their caves, and said, "I have failed, for Santa Claus is not at all selfish." The following day, the demon of envy visited Santa Claus. Said he, "The toy shops are full of playthings quite as pretty as these you are making. What a shame it is that they should interfere with your business. They make toys by machinery much quicker than you can make them by hand, and they sell them for money, while you get nothing at all for your work." But Santa Claus refused to be envious of the toy shops. "I can supply the little ones but once a year." "On Christmas Eve," he answered, "for the children are many, and I am but one. And as my work is one of love and kindness, I would be ashamed to receive money for my little gifts. But throughout all the year, the children must be amused in some way, and so the toy shops are able to bring much happiness to my little friends. I like the toy shops, and am glad to see them prosper." In spite of this second rebuff, the demon of hatred thought he would try to influence Santa Claus. So the next day he entered the busy workshop and said, "Good morning, Santa. I have bad news for you." "Then run away, like a good fellow," answered Santa Claus. bad news is something that should be kept secret and never told. You cannot escape this, however, declared the demon, for in the world are a good many who do not believe in Santa Claus, and these you are bound to hate bitterly, since they have so wronged you. Stuff and rubbish, cried Santa. And there are others who resent your making children happy, and who sneer at you and call you a foolish old rattlepate. You are quite right to hate such base slanderers, and you ought to be revenged upon them for their evil words. But I don't hate 'em, exclaimed Santa Claus positively. Such people do me no real harm, but merely render themselves and their children unhappy. Poor things! I'd much rather help them any day than injure them. Indeed, the demons could not tempt old Santa Claus in any way. On the contrary, he was shrewd enough to see that their object in visiting him was to make mischief and trouble, and his cheery laughter disconcerted the evil ones and showed to them the folly of such an undertaking. So they abandoned honeyed words and determined to use force. It is well known that no harm can come to Santa Claus while he is in the Laughing Valley, for the fairies and ryls and knooks all protect him. But on Christmas Eve he drives his reindeer out into the big world, carrying a sleigh load of toys and pretty gifts to the children. And this was the time and the occasion when his enemies had the best chance to injure him. So the demons laid their plans and awaited the arrival of Christmas Eve. The moon shone big and white in the sky, and the snow lay crisp and sparkling on the ground as Santa Claus cracked his whip and sped away out of the valley into the great world beyond. The roomy sleigh was packed full with huge sacks of toys, and as the reindeer dashed onward, our jolly old Santa laughed and whistled and sang for very joy. For in all his merry life, this was the one day in the year when he was happiest, the day he lovingly bestowed the treasures of his workshop upon the little children. It would be a busy night for him, he well knew. As he whistled and shouted and cracked his whip again, he reviewed in mind all the towns and cities and farmhouses where he was expected, and figured that he had just enough presents to go around and make every child happy. The reindeer knew exactly what was expected of them, and dashed along so swiftly that their feet scarcely seemed to touch the snow-covered ground. Suddenly, a strange thing happened. A rope shot through the moonlight, and a big noose that was in the end of it settled over the arms and body of Santa Claus and drew tight. Before he could resist, or even cry out, he was jerked from the seat of the sleigh and tumbled head-foremost into a snowbank, while the reindeer rushed onward with the load of toys and carried it quickly out of sight and sound. Such a surprising experience confused old Santa for a moment, and when he had collected his senses, he found that the wicked demons had pulled him from the snowdrift and bound him tightly with many coils of the stout rope, and then they carried the kidnapped Santa Claus away to their mountain, where they thrust the prisoner into a secret cave and chained him to the rocky wall so that he could not escape. "Ha, ha!" laughed the demons, rubbing their hands together with cruel glee. "What will the children do now? How they will cry and scold and storm when they find there are no toys in their stockings and no gifts on their Christmas trees. And what a lot of punishment they will receive from their parents, and how they will flock to our caves of selfishness and envy and hatred and malice. We have done a mighty clever thing, we demons of the caves." Now, it so chanced that on this Christmas Eve the good Santa Claus had taken with him in his sleigh Neuter the Ryl, Peter the Knook, Kilter the Pixie, and a small fairy named Whisk, his 4 favourite assistants. These little people he had often found very useful in helping to distribute his gifts to the children, and when their master was so suddenly dragged from the sleigh, they were all snugly tucked underneath the seat, where the sharp wind could not reach them. The tiny immortals knew nothing of the capture of Santa Claus until some time after he had disappeared, but finally they missed his cheery voice, and as their master always sang or whistled on his journeys, the silence warned them that something was wrong. Little Whisk stuck out his head from underneath the seat and found Santa Claus gone, and no one to direct the flight of the reindeer. "Whoa!" he called out, and the deer obediently slackened speed and came to a halt. Peter and Neuter and Kilter all jumped upon the seat and looked back over the track made by the sleigh. But Santa Claus had been left miles and miles behind. "What shall we do?" asked Whisk anxiously, all the mirth and mischief banished from his wee face by this great calamity. "We must go back at once and find our master," said Neuter the Ryl, who thought and spoke with much deliberation. "No, no!" exclaimed Peter the Knook, who, cross and crabbed though he was, might always be depended upon in an emergency. "If we delay, or go back, there will not be time to get the toys to the children before morning, and that would grieve Santa Claus more than anything else. It is certain that some wicked creatures have captured him," added Kilter thoughtfully, "and their object must be to make the children unhappy. So our first duty is to get the toys distributed as carefully as if Santa Claus were himself present. Afterward, we can search for our master and easily secure his freedom." This seemed such good and sensible advice that the others at once resolved to adopt it. So Peter the Knook called to the reindeer, and the faithful animals again sprang forward and dashed over hill and valley, through forest and plain, until they came to the houses wherein children lay sleeping and dreaming of the pretty gifts they would find on Christmas morning. The little immortals had set themselves a difficult task, for although they had assisted Santa Claus on many of his journeys, their master had always directed and guided them and told them exactly what he wished them to do. But now they had to distribute the toys according to their own judgment, and they did not understand children as well as did old Santa. So it is no wonder they made some laughable errors. Mamie Brown, who wanted a doll, got a drum instead, and a drum is of no use to a girl who loves dolls. And Charlie Smith, who delights to romp and play out of doors, and who wanted some new rubber boots to keep his feet dry, received a sewing box filled with coloured worsted and threads and needles, which made him so provoked that he thoughtlessly called our dear Santa Claus a fraud. Had there been many such mistakes, the demons would have accomplished their evil purpose and made the children unhappy. But the little friends of the absent Santa Claus laboured faithfully and intelligently to carry out their master's ideas, and they made fewer errors than might be expected under such unusual circumstances. And, although they worked as swiftly as possible, day had begun to break before the toys and other presents were all distributed. So, for the first time in many years, the reindeer trotted into the Laughing Valley. On their return, in broad daylight, with the brilliant sun peeping over the edge of the forest to prove they were far behind their accustomed hour. Having put the deer in the stable, the little folk began to wonder how they might rescue their master, and they realized they must discover, first of all, what had happened to him and where he was. So Whisk, the fairy, transported himself to the bower of the Fairy Queen, which was located deep in the heart of the forest of Burzee, and once there, it did not take him long to find out all about the naughty demons and how they had kidnapped the good Santa Claus to prevent his making children happy. The Fairy Queen also promised her assistance, and then, fortified by this powerful support, Whisk flew back to where Neuter and Peter and Kilter awaited him, and the four counselled together and laid plans to rescue their master from his enemies. It is possible that Santa Claus was not as merry as usual during the night that succeeded his capture, for although he had faith in the judgment of his little friends, he could not avoid a certain amount of worry, and an anxious look would creep at times into his kind old eyes as he thought of the disappointment that might await his dear little children. And the demons. who guarded him by turns, one after another, did not neglect to taunt him with contemptuous words in his helpless condition. When Christmas Day dawned, the demon of malice was guarding the prisoner, and his tongue was sharper than that of any of the others. "The children are waking up, Santa!" he cried. "They are waking up to find their stockings empty. Ho, ho! How they will quarrel and wail and stamp their feet in anger. Our caves will be full today, old Santa. Our caves are sure to be full." But to this, as to other light taunts, Santa Claus answered nothing. He was much grieved by his capture, it is true, but his courage did not forsake him. And, finding that the prisoner would not reply to his jeers, the demon of malice presently went away, and sent the demon of repentance to take his place. This last personage was not so disagreeable as the others. He had gentle and refined features, and his voice was soft and pleasant in tone. "My brother demons do not trust me overmuch," said he, as he entered the cavern. "But it is morning now, and the mischief is done. You cannot visit the children again for another year." "That is true," answered Santa Claus almost cheerfully. "Christmas Eve is past, and for the first time in centuries I have not visited my children." "The little ones will be greatly disappointed," murmured the demon of repentance, almost regretfully. "But that cannot be helped now. Their grief is likely to make the children selfish and envious and hateful, and if they come to the caves of the demons today, I shall get a chance to lead some of them to my cave of repentance." "Do you never repent yourself?" asked Santa Claus curiously. "Oh, yes, indeed," answered the demon. "I am even now repenting that I assisted in your capture. Of course, it is too late to remedy the evil that has been done. But repentance, you know, can come only after an evil thought or deed, for in the beginning there is nothing to repent of." "So I understand," said Santa Claus. "Those who avoid evil need never visit your cave." "As a rule, that is true," replied the demon. "Yet you, who have done no evil, are about to visit my cave at once, for to prove that I sincerely regret my share in your capture, I am going to permit you to escape." This speech greatly surprised the prisoner, until he reflected that it was just what might be expected of the demon of repentance. The fellow at once busied himself untying the knots that bound Santa Claus, and unlocking the chains that fastened him to the wall. Then he led the way through a long tunnel until they both emerged in the cave of repentance. "I hope you will forgive me," said the demon pleadingly. "I am not really a bad person, you know, and I believe I accomplish a great deal of good in the world." With this he opened a back door that let in a flood of sunshine, and Santa Claus sniffed the fresh air gratefully. "I bear no malice," said he to the demon in a gentle voice, "and I am sure the world would be a dreary place without you. So, good morning, and a Merry Christmas to you." With these words, he stepped out to greet the bright morning, and a moment later he was trudging along, whistling softly to himself, on his way to his home in the Laughing Valley. Marching over the snow toward the mountain was a vast army, made up of the most curious creatures imaginable. There were numberless knooks from the forest, as rough and crooked in appearance as the gnarled branches of the trees they ministered to. And there were dainty ryls from the fields, each one bearing the emblem of the flower or plant it guarded. Behind these were many ranks of pixies, gnomes, and nymphs, and in the rear 1,000 beautiful fairies floated along in gorgeous array. This wonderful army was led by Whisk, Peter, Neuter, and Kilter, who had assembled it to rescue Santa Claus from captivity and to punish the demons who had dared to take him away from his beloved children. And, although they looked so bright and peaceful, The little immortals were armed with powers that would be very terrible to those who had incurred their anger. Woe to the demons of the caves if this army of vengeance ever met them! But lo, coming to meet his loyal friends appeared the imposing form of Santa Claus, his white beard floating in the breeze, and his bright eyes sparkling with pleasure at this proof of the love and veneration he had inspired in the hearts of the most powerful creatures in existence. And while they clustered around him and danced with glee at his safe return, he gave them earnest thanks for their support. But Whisk, and Neuter, and Peter, and Kilter, he embraced affectionately. "It is useless to pursue the demons," said Santa Claus to the army. "They have their place in the world and can never be destroyed. But that is a great pity, nevertheless," he continued musingly. "So the fairies, and nooks, and pixies, and ryls all escorted the good man to his castle, and there left him to talk over the events of the night with his little assistants. Whisk had already rendered himself invisible and flown through the big world to see how the children were getting along on this bright Christmas morning, and by the time he returned, Peter had finished telling Santa Claus of how they had distributed the toys.
We really did very well,
cried the fairy in a pleased voice, "for I found little unhappiness among the children this morning. Still, you must not get captured again, my dear master, for we might not be so fortunate another time in carrying out your ideas." He then related the mistakes that had been made, and which he had not discovered until his tour of inspection. And Santa Claus at once sent him with rubber boots for Charlie Smith, and a doll for Mamie Brown, so that even those two disappointed ones became happy. As for the wicked demons of the caves, they were filled with anger and chagrin when they found that their clever capture of Santa Claus had come to naught. Indeed, no one on that Christmas day appeared to be at all selfish, or envious, or hateful. And, realizing that while the children's saint had so many powerful friends it was folly to oppose him, the demons never again attempted to interfere with his journeys on Christmas Eve. Kris Kringle. Just as the moon was fading amid her misty rings, and every stocking was stuffed with childhood's precious things, old Kris Kringle looked around and saw on the elm tree bough, high hung, an oriole's nest, silent and empty now. "Quite like a stocking," he laughed, "pinned up there on the tree. Little I thought the birds expected a present from me." Then old Kris Kringle, who loves a joke as well as the best, dropped a handful of flakes in the oriole's empty nest.